My mom said to me, "If you can't have a child, we should get a divorce." My husband responded calmly, "Fine, I understand, even though I'm currently pregnant." I'm Emily, a housewife in my 30s, living with my husband who works for a company. We first crossed paths while I was employed at a food-related company. Our conversations about business dealings were always pleasant, and I was charmed by his occasional smile. I mustered the courage to ask him out, but he turned me down, saying, "Sorry, I'm flattered, but I have a girlfriend." A month later, he approached me with a change of heart. I broke up with her. "Will you go out with me?" It turns out he had started noticing me after my confession. His ex-girlfriend, sensing something was amiss, had asked, "Did you fall for someone else?" When he agreed with her suggestion to break up, they ended their relationship. I felt a pang of guilt for being the catalyst for their split, but he reassured me with a warm smile, saying, "It wouldn't have lasted long anyway. Don't worry about it." His comfort eased my worries, and after 3 years of dating, we got married. When we decided to get married, he said, "I'd like us to have children after we're married. Would you be willing to stay home and support me and our future kids?" At that time, I was working at a demanding job and was eager for a change, so I agreed to become a stay-at-home wife. I was determined to support my husband and embrace this new role. The transition from a working woman to a housewife was challenging, but it was worth it for the joy of our newlywed life. Every day felt blissful, and the absence of any issues with my mother-in-law was a significant relief. Her house was only a 10-minute walk from our apartment. I initially worried about frequent visits and potential intrusiveness, but my fears proved unfounded. My in-laws were incredibly kind and supportive. Whenever I had a question, they made the effort to visit our home and explain things thoroughly. Despite our difficulties in starting a family, they were always understanding. My mother-in-law even told me, "You're more precious to me than a grandchild. I've always wished for a daughter since our family only had men. Please let me continue to cherish you like my own daughter." I adored my mother-in-law and trusted my quiet but dependable father-in-law. However, this harmonious relationship only lasted through the first few years. Over time, my once kind in-laws underwent a noticeable shift. My father-in-law became increasingly reserved, while my mother-in-law's demeanor changed drastically. Perhaps it was her true nature all along. Her attitude towards me went from being exceptionally warm to overtly cold. She has become quite harsh, frequently visiting our home, especially when my husband isn't around, and constantly nagging me about when we'll finally have a child. "It's your duty as a wife," she insists. This contrasts sharply with her previous attitude, where she once told me, "Children are gifts from heaven. They'll come in their own time, so don't rush." Now, she compares me to other families, adding pressure with remarks like, "The lady next door just had a baby, and the one next to her is expecting. What about you?" Despite her persistent pressure, it's been fruitless without my husband's involvement. He initially wanted children, but a year into our marriage, he lost interest. Even when I attempted to initiate intimacy, he would decline with excuses like, "I'm too tired, maybe another time," or "Don't bother me while I'm gaming." Despite discussing my struggles with my mother-in-law, she remained unsympathetic and continued to pressure me for a grandchild, only adding to my stress each day. Overwhelmed by her demands, I confided in my husband about the increasing pressure to have a child. He agreed to try for a baby with me, saying, "I don't think we need to rush." Despite our efforts, I didn't become pregnant. My mother-in-law continued to blame me, insisting, "It's because you're not trying hard enough. My son is not at fault at all." I even wondered if her constant criticism was making it more difficult for me to conceive. Unable to handle the mounting pressure, we decided to seek fertility treatment. I hoped this would finally ease my worries, but another issue emerged: my husband's behavior. Since we began the treatment, he became distant and cold, retreating to his room to play games after work and ignoring me when I tried to talk. This was difficult enough, but his frustration with my spending on crafting materials and his increasing volatility added to my distress. Whenever I stood up for myself, he would snap, "Who do you think allows you to live this way? You're just a housewife," and continued his selfish behavior. Even though I had quit my job at his request, he refused to acknowledge or address my concerns. One day, I came home to find him playing games during his usual work hours. I asked, "Aren't you going to work?" He simply replied, "I quit." He had resigned from his job without informing me. Shocked, I asked why, but he only grew angry, snapping, "It's none of your business." I was appalled by his response, but there was nothing I could do about a job he had already left. Initially, I wasn't too worried about finances, thinking we could get by with unemployment benefits and our savings. However, stress quickly mounted as my husband showed no interest in finding a new job. After quitting, my husband began spending all his time at home. I wished he would get out more, but he preferred to stay indoors, only venturing out to buy cigarettes. Our time together has increased significantly since he stopped working. At first, this seemed like an opportunity for more closeness, but it quickly turned sour. Just like with my mother-in-law, the constant proximity to my husband, whose attitude has shifted from warm to cold, has led to frequent arguments. I've come to realize that even simple conversations with him are now stressful, and we've almost stopped talking altogether. I find myself questioning whether this kind of married life is worth continuing. I started to feel like I had reached my breaking point with this marriage and began searching for a way out. Fed up with his endless gaming, I confronted him. "You're not a child. Stop playing games all day and start looking for a job." He then mentioned, "By the way, my mom said if you can't have a child, we should get divorced." In that moment, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if my mother-in-law was indirectly helping me. I had just discovered that I was pregnant after a checkup that day, and I had planned to share the news with him that evening. However, deciding not to tell him right away seemed like the right choice. It allowed me to distance myself from both my mother-in-law and my husband. I handed him the divorce papers, which I had pre-filled and kept in a drawer. "Okay, I understand. Here are the divorce papers," I said. My husband, clearly unprepared for this turn of events, looked stunned and speechless as he saw the papers. His usual commanding demeanor vanished, replaced by a bewildered expression. He seemed at a loss for words but began filling out the documents, clearly feeling compelled to comply with his mother's wishes. As he completed the forms, he kept casting glances at me, still processing the shock. We agreed to discuss property division later, but there wasn't much to divide. Our assets were minimal, largely because my husband had a tendency to spend extravagantly on his hobbies. While he criticized my spending, he was far more reckless with his own money, frequently splurging on gaming and amusement arcades. He had always been bad with saving money, both before and after our marriage, so we had no significant assets to divide. When it became clear that there was no real property to split, I thought our discussion was finished. However, my husband insisted otherwise. He pointed to a bank statement and said, "Don't we still have our savings?" The statement showed a substantial amount of savings, which he suggested we divide. I explained, "This money is from before our marriage, so it isn't part of the property division." His face went pale, but he countered, "Fine, but this apartment should be included in the division, right? I lived here too." I had to deliver some difficult news. "Unfortunately, the apartment is in my name, so you have no claim to it. Additionally, I've already listed it for sale, so you'll need to move out soon. Please make arrangements to leave. It would be inconvenient for you to stay here," I said with a calm smile. I had been saving for a future home, anticipating that this apartment might eventually be too small. Saving money had always been a hobby of mine, and I had accumulated substantial savings before our marriage. Even as a regular employee, I was able to purchase the apartment with those savings. So I did have some assets. With the proceeds from the sale, I planned to build a new house in the city center. Of course, this property, being from before our marriage, was not subject to division. It seemed my husband was unaware of this detail. He apparently believed he would be entitled to half of my property, but that was not the case. When he realized he wouldn't receive any part of it, he was left stunned. The shock left him in a daze as we continued our discussion, but he struggled to recover his composure. With little left to discuss, the conversation wrapped up quickly, and we proceeded to submit the divorce papers to our lawyers. The divorce was finalized smoothly. A few months later, I moved back to my parents' home, and with their support, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. I named him Ambrose, inspired by the phrase, "A boys be ambitious." Now, I'm enjoying a fulfilling life with my parents and my cherished child. I haven't informed my ex-husband or his family about Ambrose. I'm certain that if I did, my former mother-in-law would come storming in, demanding, "Give me back my grandchild." As for my ex-husband, after being forced out of the apartment, he returned to his parents' home. He has become a recluse, unable to cope with the ease of our divorce. His behavior is so suspicious that he often gets stopped by the police when he ventures outside. It's a rather pitiable situation. I later discovered that his decision to quit his job stemmed from deteriorating work relationships. It turns out my ex-husband was disliked at his company for his constant bad-mouthing, particularly by his female colleagues, and eventually, everyone began to ignore him. Unable to bear the isolation, he abruptly resigned. Perhaps his true nature was evident even before our marriage, kind only to me, while hiding his true colors beneath a facade. 3 years later, I was working as the manager of a craft store. After becoming a regular customer at a local shop, the manager, Linda, approached me with an offer. I'm getting older and considering retirement. If you're interested, Emily, would you like to take over this store? Linda asked. At that time, my parents were actively helping with childcare, and I was looking for a new job. If I turned down the offer, the store would close, which would inconvenience many loyal customers. Weighing these factors, I decided to accept and take over the store. While attending to a regular customer today, I was surprised by an unexpected visit from my former mother-in-law and ex-husband. Wow, this is a lovely shop, my ex-husband remarked. Yeah, Mom, look at this fabric. It would look great on you, he added. Annoyed by their obvious flattery, I asked, what are you doing here? My former mother-in-law then demanded, give me back my grandson. It seemed she had somehow learned about my child's birth and wanted him as the heir to their family. You were already pregnant when I asked for the divorce. Why didn't you tell me? If I had known, I wouldn't have gone through with it, my ex-husband accused. That's exactly why I wanted a divorce. If you had known about the pregnancy, you would have done everything you could to prevent it. I shot back, glaring at him and my former mother-in-law. My former mother-in-law then demanded, so, are you going to give me back my grandchild or not? I want to live with him soon. You've had him for 3 years. Now it's my turn. Her entitlement was staggering. As I stood there, incredulous, my parents and Ambrose arrived, having been alerted by a regular customer. What's going on? Is there a problem? They asked, clearly concerned and ready to assist. Seeing Ambrose holding hands with my parents, my former mother-in-law tried to approach him, saying, oh, he's so cute. Just like my son when he was young. Look, I'm your grandma. I attempted to intervene, but it wasn't necessary. Ambrose, clinging to my mother, said firmly, this is my only grandma. Can you please leave now? My mother nodded and asked the former mother-in-law to leave, but she insisted, just give me the child. Meanwhile, my ex-husband, eager to forcibly take Ambrose from my parents, advanced. I moved in front of Ambrose to protect him, but being much smaller, I was easily pushed aside. Ambrose, be careful, I shouted. My ex-husband was just inches away from grabbing Ambrose when suddenly his body was lifted off the ground. Looking up, I saw my father, who had executed a precise shoulder throw. Unbeknownst to my ex-husband, my father was a police officer with advanced judo skills. Stunned and in pain, my ex-husband looked up at my father with a mixture of fear and disbelief. If you continue to harass my child or grandchild, I will take further action, my father warned, displaying his police badge. Seeing this, my former mother-in-law, now pale and shaken, quickly pulled my ex-husband away, and they fled. I don't know what happened to them after that, and honestly, I have no desire to find out. Several years later, inspired by my father, Ambrose set his sights on becoming a police officer. I want to be a police officer when I grow up so I can protect Mom too, he said with determination. He has been working hard in his studies to achieve this goal, and is now undefeated in judo among his peers, thanks to my father's training. I'm excited to see my son grow into a remarkable person.
I never imagined a simple doorbell could herald such chaos. It rang with an innocuous melody, yet the sound sent tremors through my peaceful afternoon like a distress signal. I peered through the window and my heart sank. Rowena and Elsie stood on my doorstep, armed with suitcases and sheepish grins. As I opened the door, Rowena swept me into an unwanted embrace. Brinley, darling. Surprise, we'll be staying with you for a while. Elsie breezed past me, already making herself at home. Thanks for having us, sis. You're a lifesaver. I forced a smile, my mind reeling. Carter emerged from the kitchen, his face mirroring my confusion. Mom, Elsie, what's going on? Well, you see, Rowena began, we're having a bit of work done on the house, and we'll need to stay somewhere for a few weeks. Carter's brow furrowed. You didn't mention anything about renovations. It was rather sudden, Rowena said with a dismissive wave. But no need to fret, dear. We'll be out of your hair before you know it. Elsie plopped onto the couch, kicking off her shoes. Yeah, just a temporary thing. You two lovebirds can handle us for a little while, right? I shot Carter a pleading look, but he simply shrugged, seemingly accepting the situation. As Rowena and Elsie chattered about their living arrangements, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. My peaceful oasis had been infiltrated, and I had a gut instinct this was just the beginning of a very unwelcome disturbance. Rowena and Elsie wasted no time making themselves at home. And by at home, I mean trampling all over my personal space and boundaries. It started small. Elsie borrowing my makeup without asking, or Rowena snooping through my home office under the guise of curiosity. But soon, their intrusions grew more audacious. One morning, I discovered Elsie lounging in my favorite armchair, her bare feet propped up on my antique coffee table, a family heirloom from my grandmother. When I politely asked her to remove her feet, she scoffed and rolled her eyes. "Relax, Bryn. It's just a table." The disrespect stung, but before I could respond, Rowena emerged from my office, rifling through a stack of my sketchbooks. "Rowena, those are private," I protested, but she waved me off dismissively. "Oh, don't be so uptight, dear. I'm just admiring your work." I bit my tongue, recognizing the futility of arguing. As the days wore on, their audacity escalated. Elsie started borrowing my clothes without permission, leaving makeup stains and spills in their wake. Rowena treated my office like her own personal lounge, leaving coffee rings and crumbs scattered across my desk. The final straw came when I realized my high-end drawing tablet was missing. I tore through the house, searching every nook and cranny, but it was nowhere to be found. When I confronted Rowena and Elsie, they feigned innocence, suggesting I must have misplaced it. But deep down, I knew the truth. One of them had taken it, without a shred of respect or regard for my belongings or workspace. As if that wasn't enough, I later discovered that an essential project file had been mysteriously deleted from my computer. Hours of work, gone in an instant. I tried to remain calm, but my frustration was reaching a boiling point. When Carter returned home from work that evening, I wasted no time venting my grievances, but to my dismay, he simply shrugged it off, urging me to be more accommodating. "They're family, Bryn," he said, as if that excused their entitled behavior. "I'm sure it was just an accident." I wanted to scream. Didn't he see how disrespectful and invasive they were being? How could he dismiss my concerns so easily? As I lay in bed that night, seething with anger and resentment, a dark thought crept into my mind. If Carter wouldn't stand up for me, I would have to find a way to stand up for myself, no matter what it took. As if the constant invasions of privacy and disrespect for my belongings weren't enough, Rowena and Elsie managed to find a new way to stomp all over my heart. It started when I overheard Elsie bragging to her friends about her latest gig at a local bar. "Yeah, I've been playing this sweet vintage violin. Gives me such a cool, rustic vibe on stage." My blood ran cold. There was only one vintage violin she could be referring to, my late grandfather's treasured instrument, passed down through generations. The thought of Elsie carelessly lugging it around to seedy bars made me sick. I confronted her later that day, my voice trembling with anger. "Have you been using Grandpa's violin for your gigs?" Elsie had the audacity to roll her eyes. "Relax, Bryn. I'm just borrowing it." "Borrowing it? That violin is a priceless family heirloom. You can't just take it without asking." "Geez, calm down. It's not like it's made of gold or something." Her flippant attitude only fueled my rage. I stormed into the living room, where Rowena sat sipping tea, and demanded an explanation. "Did you know about this? Did you give her permission to take Grandpa's violin?" Rowena set down her cup, leveling me with an icy glare. "And what if I did? It's been gathering dust in the attic for years. At least Elsie is putting it to good use." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That violin was more than just an instrument. It was a cherished connection to my late grandfather, a man I deeply loved and respected, and they were treating it like a disposable toy. "Put it to good use?" I sputtered. "She's hauling it around to dive bars and God knows where else. It's gonna get damaged or stolen." "Don't be so dramatic," Rowena snapped. "Elsie is being responsible with it." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words died in my throat as Elsie sauntered in, cradling the violin with reckless abandon. Sure enough, there were fresh scratches and dents marring the once pristine surface. Tears of rage and heartbreak stung my eyes as I rushed over, carefully taking the instrument from her grasp. "You've damaged it," I choked out. "How could you be so careless?" Elsie merely shrugged. It's just a silly old violin, no big deal. In that moment, I understood the depth of their disrespect and entitlement. To them, my cherished possessions and family heirlooms meant nothing. They were mere objects to be used and discarded at their convenience. As I cradled the battered violin, I knew something had to change. If they couldn't respect my boundaries or my belongings, I would find a way to make them pay, no matter what it took. Just when I thought Rowena and Elsie couldn't stoop any lower, Carter dropped a bombshell that shattered what little remained of my trust in him. We were sitting down for dinner, a rare moment of normalcy amidst the chaos, when he cleared his throat nervously. "Bryn, there's something I need to tell you." My fork hovered midair as a sense of dread washed over me. "What is it?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Well, you know my mom's been having some financial trouble lately." Of course I knew. Rowena's reckless spending and refusal to hold down a steady job had been a constant source of strain on the family. "Yeah, and?" I prodded, bracing myself for whatever was coming. "She needed to borrow some money to get back on her feet," Carter admitted. "So I lent her a pretty significant amount from our savings." The fork clattered to my plate as the words hit me like a slap across the face. "You did what?" "Now, honey, don't get upset." "Don't get upset?" I sputtered, my voice rising with each word. "Carter, that was our money. Our life savings. How could you make such a huge financial decision without even consulting me?" His shoulders sagged. I know. But she's my mother, Bryn. She was in a real bind, and I wanted to help her out." My gaze shifted to Rowena, who sat smugly sipping her wine, as if this entire situation was perfectly normal. The sheer audacity of it all made my blood boil. "Help her out?" I cried. "She's been helping herself to our finances for years. When is enough going to be enough?" Carter's brow furrowed defensively. "That's not fair. She's family, and she needed our support." "Our support?" I laughed bitterly. "Or just your blind obedience?" Elsie snickered from across the table, clearly enjoying the show. I shot her a withering glare, my rage reaching a boiling point. "Stay out of this," I snapped. "You're just as bad as she is, taking whatever you want with no regard for anyone else." Carter slammed his fist on the table, startling us all. "That's enough. I'm sick of all this fighting and negativity. My mother needed help, so I helped her. End of story." I stared at him in disbelief, searching his face for any shred of remorse or understanding, and finding none. In that moment, it became painfully clear. Carter was so deep in his family's toxic web of manipulation, he was blind to the truth. As Rowena and Elsie exchanged smug glances, reveling in their victory, something inside me shifted. The rage and resentment I'd been bottling up for weeks solidified into a cold, hard resolve. If Carter wouldn't stand up for me, for us, then I would have to take matters into my own hands. It was time to fight fire with fire. The final straw came when Elsie crossed the unforgivable line of sabotaging my career. I was deep in preparation mode for a major client presentation, the kind of job that could make or break my fledgling design business. For days, I'd been pouring every ounce of my creative energy into crafting the perfect pitch deck. The night before the big meeting, I triple-checked that all my files were in order, down to the last detail. Satisfied, I powered down my computer and tried to get some rest, my mind buzzing with anticipation. The next morning, I arrived at the client's office bright and early, laptop in hand and ready to dazzle them with my concepts. But when I pulled up the presentation, my heart dropped into my stomach. The meticulously designed slides I'd spent countless hours perfecting were gone, replaced with a garish, haphazard mess of mismatched fonts and sloppy imagery. It looked like the work of a kindergartner, not a professional graphic designer. I frantically tried to recover the original files, but it was no use. They'd been completely overwritten. As the client's team filed into the conference room, I had no choice but to barrel ahead with the travesty before me. Needless to say, the meeting was a disaster. The client was utterly unimpressed, and by the end, I could practically see the smoke billowing from their ears in frustration. When I returned home later that day, seething with humiliation and defeat, the culprit was waiting for me with a smug grin. "How'd the big presentation go?" Elsie asked innocently. I saw red. "You did this, didn't you? You messed with my files." Her grin widened. "Oh, those old things? I figured they could use a little sprucing up." The sheer audacity of her words left me momentarily speechless. "You had no right. Those were my professional designs for an important client." Elsie shrugged nonchalantly. "What's the big deal? I just wanted to put my own creative spin on them." "Your spin?" I sputtered. "You completely butchered them. Do you have any idea how much time and effort went into that work?" "Yeesh, calm down," she scoffed. "It's not like I sold them off to a competitor or anything." A cold chill washed over me as the implication of her words sank in. "Wait, you didn't." The sly grin that crept across her face said it all. My heart pounded in my ears as the full weight of her betrayal hit me. "You stole my work," I whispered, horrified. "My intellectual property, and sent it to a competitor, didn't you?" Before she could respond, Rowena came sauntering in, oblivious to the bombshell Elsie had just dropped. "What's all the fuss about?" "Elsie stole my designs," I cried, rounding on her. "She sabotaged my presentation and tried to pass off my work as her own." For once, Rowena's smug expression faltered, but only for a moment. "Oh, Brinley, I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding." Her words trailed off as she took in the look of utter devastation on my face. In that moment, it was clear. They truly didn't care about the damage they'd caused, the boundaries they'd trampled, or the complete violation of my trust. Something inside me snapped. Tears of rage and heartbreak streamed down my cheeks as I came to a painful realization. If I wanted to reclaim my life, my business, and what little dignity I had left, there was only one path forward: revenge. In the aftermath of Elsie's unforgivable betrayal, I knew I had to take decisive action, not just for my own sake, but for my business and integrity as a professional. The next morning, I wasted no time seeking legal counsel. Intellectual property theft is a serious matter, the no-nonsense lawyer stated as she reviewed the damning evidence I'd compiled against Elsie. "We have a strong case here." Relief washed over me. "So you'll take it on? You can help me go after her?" She leveled me with a steely gaze. "I'll do everything in my power to ensure your original work is protected and that this Elsie is held accountable. But we need to move quickly before any more damage is done." I nodded, my jaw set with determination. Whatever it takes, I want to hit her where it really hurts. As the lawyer began mapping out our legal strategy, an unexpected twist emerged. In gathering proof of Elsie's actions, I uncovered a paper trail suggesting far more insidious misdeeds. "It appears your mother-in-law has been siphoning funds from your joint accounts for quite some time," the lawyer revealed, sliding a stack of incriminating bank statements across her desk. My heart pounded as I scanned the documents, seeing figure after figure that couldn't be explained away as mere loans or financial troubles. Rowena had been systematically draining our life savings for years, using my husband's blind loyalty as cover. White-hot anger coursed through my veins as the full scope of her manipulation came into focus. "That conniving, lying. Take a breath," the lawyer cautioned. "This is a positive development for our case. With this evidence, we can not only pursue Elsie for the intellectual property theft, but also go after your mother-in-law for fraud and financial exploitation." A grim satisfaction settled over me. Finally, I had the ammunition I needed to bring these two leeches to their knees and reclaim what was rightfully mine. "Do it," I said, my voice steely with resolve. "Take them for everything they've got." Over the next few weeks, the lawyer and I worked tirelessly, building an airtight case against Elsie and Rowena. Every instance of theft, deception, and violation was meticulously documented and added to the growing pile of damning evidence. As the court date loomed closer, I could practically taste the sweet vengeance that awaited them. No more being the docile victim, no more turning the other cheek. It was time to unleash the full force of karmic retribution. Carter, bless his oblivious heart, remained largely in the dark about the extent of my actions. A part of me felt a twinge of guilt for going behind his back, but his willful ignorance had enabled this toxic cycle for far too long. This was something I had to do alone. Finally, the day arrived. I strode into the courthouse, my head held high, ready to watch the house of lies Rowena and Elsie had built come crumbling down around them. As they were led into the courtroom, their expressions shifted from nonchalant to ashen-faced when they locked eyes with me, and the mountain of evidence awaiting them. I settled into my seat, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. The time for talking was over. Now, it was time for them to face the consequences. The day of reckoning finally arrived in the form of a family gathering Carter had naively organized to clear the air. Little did he know, I had something far more explosive in store. As relatives and close friends trickled into our backyard, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Rowena and Elsie huddled together, shooting me venomous looks, while Carter made awkward small talk, oblivious to the storm brewing. When the last guests had arrived, I cleared my throat and stepped forward, leveling Rowena and Elsie with an icy glare. "I think it's time we address the elephant in the room," I announced, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "The theft, the lies, the utter disrespect you two have shown me and my household," Rowena scoffed. "Here we go again with the hysterics. Can't we just enjoy a nice family get-together?" "Hysterics?" I echoed with a bitter laugh. "You want to talk hysterics? How about the fact that you've been bleeding my husband dry for years to fund your sickening spending habits?" A hush fell over the crowd as I whipped out the incriminating stack of bank statements, slamming them down on the patio table with a resonant thud. "Or better yet, how about the fact that your precious daughter stole my intellectual property and tried to off my work as her own?" Elsie paled, suddenly finding great interest in studying her shoes. Rowena opened her mouth, no doubt to spew more lies and deflections, but I cut her off with a raised hand. "Save it. I have proof of every single underhanded, deceitful thing you two frauds have pulled." I turned to Carter, my heart aching at the shell-shocked expression on his face. "I'm sorry, babe, but you need to see this." One by one, I laid out the damning evidence. Bank statements, emails, contracts, everything the lawyer and I had meticulously compiled to expose their greed and treachery. With each new revelation, the murmurs and gasps from the crowd grew louder. By the time I was finished, the backyard had fallen into a stunned silence, all eyes boring into Rowena and Elsie with a mixture of shock and disgust. Carter looked like he'd been sucker-punched, his eyes glistening with unshed tears of betrayal. "Mom, Elsie, is this true? Have you really been lying and stealing from us this whole time?" For once, Rowena was at a loss for words, her mouth opening and closing like a gasping fish. Elsie simply stared at the ground, shoulders slumped in shame. The silence stretched on, suffocating, until finally Carter found his voice, a raw, guttural sound that cut straight to my core. "Get out." The words hung in the air, heavy as a death sentence. Rowena's head snapped up, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Carter, honey, you can't mean—" "I said get out," he roared, his face contorted with a rage I'd never witnessed. "Both of you. I don't ever want to see your faces again, after the way you've disgraced this family." As Rowena and Elsie beat a hasty retreat, their wails of protest drowned out by the din of scathing rebukes from the crowd, I let out a long, shuddering breath. It was finally over. The web of lies and manipulation had been shredded, laid bare for all to see. And in that moment, as Carter pulled me into a fierce embrace, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, we would face it together, free from the toxic shackles of the past. The fallout from exposing Rowena and Elsie's despicable actions was swift and uncompromising. Within days, the lawyer had them served with an ironclad legal case, leaving them with no choice but to comply. "They'll be forced to repay every cent they stole, plus damages," the lawyer assured me with grim satisfaction. "And Elsie will have to issue a public apology for the intellectual property theft against your company." A weight lifted off my shoulders as I realized their reign of manipulation and entitlement was truly coming to an end. Carter, newly emboldened after the shocking revelations, stood firmly by my side. "I can't believe I let them take advantage of us for so long," he said, shame and anger warring in his voice. "But not anymore. We're going to make things right." With Rowena and Elsie legally bound to make amends, a strange sense of peace washed over me. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could breathe freely, unburdened by their toxic presence and disrespect. In the weeks that followed, the restitution payments began trickling in, allowing Carter and I to slowly rebuild our plundered savings. And true to the court order, Elsie was forced to issue a humiliating public statement, apologizing for her unprofessional actions and acknowledging the theft of my intellectual property. As satisfying as it was to watch her swallow her pride, what mattered most was that I could finally move forward without that dark cloud hanging over my career. With Carter's renewed support, I took a deep breath and set to work realizing a long-held dream, launching my own design studio. The early days were a whirlwind of hassles and headaches, but I poured every ounce of passion into making the new venture a success, a metaphorical raised middle finger to Rowena and Elsie's attempts to derail me. As clients slowly trickled in, drawn by my talent and determination, I found myself truly thriving for the first time in years. No more walking on eggshells, no more snide comments or disrespect. This was my kingdom, my own little slice of hard-earned independence. Carter rallied behind me every step of the way, having seen firsthand the resilience and strength that guided me through our family's darkest chapter. In many ways, the experience had remolded our relationship into something deeper, more unbreakable than ever before. "I'm so proud of you," he murmured one night as we relaxed on the patio, glasses of wine in hand. "After everything you've been through, you still came out on top." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the wine. "We came out on top, you and me, babe. We're an unstoppable team now." As the months rolled by and my studio's success continued to soar, that hard-won victory only grew sweeter. The cherry on top came when I received news that I'd been nominated for a prestigious design award, a testament to my talent and professionalism that Rowena and Elsie could never tarnish. The night of the ceremony, I walked the red carpet in a stunning gown, Carter beaming proudly by my side. And when they called my name as the winner, I gracefully accepted the award, basking in the roar of the crowd. In that shining moment of triumph, I knew one thing with crystal clear certainty: the dark days of being trampled and disrespected were firmly behind me. This was the beginning of a new era, one of success and empowerment on my own terms. No more disturbances, only the sweet taste of victory well earned. The freezing wind howled relentlessly, whipping against the car windows as Celine's voice cut through the frigid air, laced with disdain. "You two have been nothing but a burden since you moved in. Sort out your own mess this time." With a dismissive wave, she rolled up the window, leaving me and my feverish granddaughter Alara stranded on the icy curb. I clutched Alara closer, her small frame shivering violently against mine. The hospital loomed in the distance, a mirage of safety amidst the swirling snow. I had no choice but to forge ahead, one painful step at a time. This wasn't how I envisioned my life after Robert's passing. Moving in with my son Denton and his family was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to heal and create precious memories with Alara. But Celine had other plans. From the moment I stepped through their door, her barely concealed contempt seeped into every interaction. Denton, ever the peacekeeper, remained oblivious to the toxic undercurrents brewing beneath his own roof. Alara's once vibrant spirit gradually dimmed, her laughter becoming a rare commodity. I watched helplessly as Celine's sharp tongue chipped away at her confidence, dismissing her as a nuisance whenever Denton wasn't around. "Grandma, I'm so cold," Alara whimpered, her words muffled against my coat. I tightened my grip, determination hardening my resolve. We would make it through this ordeal, and then I would find a way to free us from Celine's suffocating grip. I could no longer stand idly by while my granddaughter's light was extinguished before my eyes. The time had come to gather my strength and confront the shadows that threatened to consume us both. After the harrowing ordeal of reaching the hospital, Alara and I were admitted for treatment. As the doctor tended to us, I couldn't shake the nagging worry that had taken root. Alara's dull eyes and listless demeanor hinted at a deeper malaise than mere illness. Once we were settled in our room, I gently broached the subject. "Sweetheart, is everything okay at home? You know you can tell Grandma anything." Alara hesitated, her small fingers fiddling with the hospital blanket. "Mom gets really mad sometimes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "When Dad's not home, she yells a lot and calls me names." My heart clenched at her words, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Celine's contempt extended far beyond me. Her own daughter was a target of her cruelty. "Does she ever hurt you?" I asked, dreading the answer. Alara shook her head quickly. "No, she just gets really angry and says mean things." Relief washed over me, but the revelation left a bitter taste. How could a mother treat her child with such disdain? As the days passed, Alara's trust in me grew, and she began sharing more disturbing details. Celine's neglect knew no bounds, forgetting meals, leaving Alara alone for hours, and lashing out over the most trivial mishaps. With each new disclosure, my resolve hardened. I couldn't allow this toxic environment to continue poisoning my precious granddaughter's spirit. But confronting Celine directly would only invite manipulation and denials. I needed concrete evidence to expose her true nature to Denton. From that moment on, I became a silent observer, carefully documenting every incident, every cruel remark, and every act of negligence. My notebook became a damning record of Celine's transgressions, a weapon to wield against her facade of perfection. As we recovered in the hospital, I found solace in plotting our escape from Celine's tyranny. No longer would we cower in the shadows, fearing her wrath. It was time to bring her reign of terror to an end, no matter the cost. Back home after our hospital stay, I vowed to keep a closer eye on Celine's behavior. It didn't take long for her true colors to rear their ugly head once more. One afternoon, Alara accidentally spilled her juice while coloring at the kitchen table. A harmless mistake, one any child could make. But to Celine, it was an unforgivable offense. "You clumsy brat," she snarled, snatching the empty cup from Alara's trembling hands. "Look at the mess you've made. Can't you do anything right?" Alara shrank back, her eyes welling with tears. "I'm sorry, Mommy. It was an accident." Celine's lips curled in a sneer. "Sorry doesn't clean up your messes, does it? Useless, just like your good-for-nothing grandma." My blood boiled at her scathing words, but I forced myself to remain calm. Confronting her directly would only provoke more venom. As Celine stormed off, muttering insults under her breath, I pulled Alara into a tight embrace. "Don't listen to her, sweetie. You did nothing wrong." Alara clung to me, her small frame shaking with quiet sobs. It tore me apart to see her light dimming further with each verbal assault. From that day on, I became Celine's silent shadow, discreetly documenting her every outburst and cruelty. My notebook filled with damning accounts of her neglect and emotional abuse, building an airtight case against her. Meanwhile, I shielded Alara as best I could, offering comfort and reassurance whenever Celine's wrath struck. Our bond grew stronger with each shared confidence, a fortress against the storm raging around us. Celine, oblivious to my clandestine efforts, continued her reign of terror unchecked. But with each passing day, my determination solidified. I would not allow this venomous woman to break my granddaughter's spirit any longer. The perfect opportunity arose when Denton announced a business trip, leaving us alone with Celine for a week. I steeled myself, ready to unleash the full force of my ammunition. As Denton's car disappeared down the driveway, Celine turned to us with a sinister smile. "Looks like it's just us girls for a while. You two had better be on your best behavior." I met her gaze unflinchingly, my notebook tucked securely under my arm. The time for reckoning had arrived. With Denton away, Celine descended into a frenzy of cruelty, unleashing her wrath on Alara and me without restraint. Gone were the pretenses of civility. Her true, vile nature was on full display. "Look at this pigsty," she snarled, sweeping her arm across the living room. A few toys lay scattered, evidence of Alara's innocent playtime. "Clean up this mess immediately, you worthless brats!" Alara scrambled to gather her belongings, her small hands trembling. I clenched my fists, biting back the torrent of anger threatening to spill forth. As the week dragged on, each day brought fresh torment. Celine delighted in berating Alara over the slightest infractions, her insults growing increasingly vicious. "You're nothing but a burden, a mistake I wish I'd never made," she hissed, towering over Alara's cowering form. I couldn't bear to witness the light in my granddaughter's eyes dimming further. Enough was enough. I would no longer stand idly by. That night, as Celine retired to her room, I gathered Alara close. "Sweetheart, I need you to be brave for me," I whispered. "Tell me everything that's been happening when your dad is away. Don't leave out a single detail." With tears streaming down her cheeks, Alara poured out the heartbreaking truth. The neglect, the name-calling, the constant belittling. Each word was a dagger to my heart, but I diligently recorded every painful revelation in my notebook. By the end of her testimony, my hands were trembling with rage. How could a mother inflict such cruelty upon her own child? As the week drew to a close, I found myself at a crossroads. Part of me yearned to confront Celine head-on, to unleash the full force of my righteous fury. but a small, cautious voice warned against such rash action. Without Denton's support, any confrontation would be futile, leaving Alara and me vulnerable to further retaliation. No, I needed to bide my time, to wait for the perfect moment to shatter Celine's facade and expose her true, monstrous nature. Only then could we find the freedom and peace we so desperately craved. With a heavy heart, I tucked my damning evidence away, forcing a mask of calm over my seething rage. Celine would pay for her sins, but not until I had Denton as an ally in our fight. For now I would endure, shielding Alara as best I could until the time for reckoning arrived. The day of the storm dawned ominously, the leaden skies foreshadowing the tempest to come. As the winds howled and the snow swirled relentlessly, Alara and I fell ill, our bodies racked with fever and chills. In our weakened state, we were mere burdens in Celine's eyes. "You two are more trouble than you're worth," she spat, glaring at us with undisguised contempt. "I'm not wasting my time dragging your sorry selves to the hospital." I mustered what little strength I had, pleading with her. "Alara is just a child, Celine. She needs medical care." Her lips twisted into a cruel sneer. "Then I suggest you figure it out, old woman. I've got better things to do than cater to your pathetic whims." With those venomous words, she turned and stalked away, leaving us to fend for ourselves against the raging storm. Desperation clawed at me as I gathered Alara into my arms, her small form burning with fever. We had no choice but to brave the treacherous conditions, no matter the cost. Each step was an agonizing battle, the wind and snow conspiring to impede our progress. Alara whimpered softly, her grip on me growing weaker with every grueling minute that passed. By the time we finally stumbled through the hospital doors, we were both on the verge of collapse. Nurses rushed to our aid, whisking us away for urgent treatment. As I lay in the sterile hospital bed, my thoughts churned with a potent mixture of fear and fury. Celine's callous actions had nearly cost us our lives, all because of her twisted need to assert dominance and control. In that moment, any lingering doubts evaporated. I could no longer sit idly by, allowing her toxicity to poison our lives. It was time to take a stand, to break free from her tyrannical grip once and for all. With grim determination, I retrieved my notebook from my bag, flipping through the damning pages. Every cruel word, every act of neglect, meticulously documented and ready to be unleashed. Celine's reign of terror would end, even if I had to burn her twisted world to the ground. I would not rest until Alara and I were free from her insidious clutches, free to breathe the sweet air of liberation. As I clutched the notebook to my chest, a newfound resolve coursed through my veins. The battle lines were drawn, and I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The hospital became our sanctuary, a reprieve from Celine's poisonous grip. As Alara and I slowly regained our strength, I knew this temporary peace wouldn't last. It was time to strike back and reclaim our lives. Seizing a rare moment alone, I dialed Denton's number with trembling fingers. He answered on the third ring, his voice laced with concern. "Mom, is everything okay?" I took a steadying breath, steeling my resolve. "No, Denton, everything is not okay. We need to talk, in person, as soon as you return." A pause, then. "What's going on? Has Celine done something?" The dam of pent-up frustration burst open. "That woman you call a wife is a monster, Denton. She's been emotionally abusing Alara and me for months, and this latest incident nearly cost us our lives." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Mom, those are heavy accusations. Celine can be difficult at times, but surely you're exaggerating." "I'm not exaggerating anything," I snapped. "I have documented proof of her cruelty, her neglect, her vicious behavior. Open your eyes, son, before it's too late." An uneasy silence stretched between us, punctuated by Denton's ragged breaths. Finally he spoke, his voice strained. "All right, Mom, I'll be home in 2 days. We'll discuss this then." As I ended the call, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The wheels were in motion. Soon, Celine's twisted web of lies would unravel, and the truth would be laid bare. Over the next 2 days, I pored over my notebook, reviewing each damning entry with a critical eye. Every detail had to be razor-sharp, leaving no room for doubt or manipulation. I also took the time to bolster Alara's courage, reminding her of the importance of speaking up and telling her father the unvarnished truth. No more fear, no more hiding. It was time to confront the shadows head-on. When Denton finally arrived at the hospital, his face was drawn and haggard. I wasted no time with pleasantries, thrusting my notebook into his hands. "Read it," I commanded. "Every page, every word. Then we'll talk." As he pored over the meticulously detailed accounts, his expression morphed from skepticism to horror. Alara's soft voice filled the tense silence, recounting the torment she had endured at her mother's hands. By the time she finished, Denton's eyes were filled with unshed tears. He raised a trembling hand, silencing my impending tirade. "Enough," he rasped. "I've heard enough. How could I have been so blind?" In that moment, I knew we had won. Celine's twisted facade had finally shattered, leaving her naked and exposed before the harsh light of truth. As Denton pulled us into a fierce embrace, I allowed myself a small, grim smile. The battle had been arduous, but we had emerged victorious. Celine's reign of terror was over, and a new dawn beckoned on the horizon. The air was thick with tension as Denton confronted Celine, my damning notebook clutched in his white-knuckled grip. Alara and I watched from the sidelines, a united front against the storm about to be unleashed. "How could you, Celine?" Denton's voice was laced with barely contained fury. "My own daughter, my own mother. How could you treat them with such cruelty?" Celine's eyes widened in mock innocence, her lips curving in sickly sweet smile. "Darling, whatever are you talking about? Those two are nothing but a pair of hysterical liars trying to turn you against me." I felt Alara tense beside me, no doubt bracing for another onslaught of venom from her mother's forked tongue. But Denton was having none of it. "Save it," he spat, thrusting the notebook towards her. "I've seen the proof with my own eyes. The names you called her, the neglect, the emotional abuse, it's all documented here in excruciating detail." Celine's saccharine mask slipped, her features twisting into an ugly sneer. "So the old hag has been keeping a little diary, has she? How quaint." "This is no joke, Celine." Denton's voice was low, dangerous. "I want the truth, and I want it now. Why? Why would you treat your own family with such contempt?" For a moment, Celine's eyes darted towards us, a flicker of unease crossing her face. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. "Because they're nothing but a pair of worthless burdens dragging me down," she hissed. "That sniveling brat of yours is a constant annoyance, and your mother is a meddlesome relic who should have been left to rot in a nursing home." The venom in her words took my breath away, but Alara surprised us all by stepping forward, her small frame trembling with a newfound courage. "You're wrong, Mommy," she said, her voice ringing with clarity. "Grandma is the only one who ever really loved me. You're just a mean, horrible person." Celine recoiled as if struck, her eyes blazing with fury. For a moment, I feared she might lash out physically, but Denton was there in an instant, placing himself between her and Alara like a shield. "That's enough," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I've seen all I need to see. We're done, Celine. Pack your things and get out of my house." As Celine sputtered and raged, hurling every vile insult in her arsenal, Denton simply turned his back on her, gathering Alara into his arms. I followed suit, wrapping my arms around them both in a protective embrace. The battle was won, the monster slain. As Celine's shrill threats faded into the distance, a profound sense of peace washed over me. The shadows had been banished, and a new chapter was about to begin. In the aftermath of Celine's explosive departure, a palpable sense of relief settled over our household. The shadows that had once loomed so oppressively were banished, replaced by the warm glow of newfound freedom. As Denton finalized the divorce proceedings, Alara and I began the process of healing, shedding the emotional scars inflicted by Celine's reign of terror. With each passing day, I watched my granddaughter's spirit regain its vibrancy, her laughter echoing through the halls once more. Gone were the timid glances and hushed tones, replaced by the unbridled joy of a child finally allowed to be herself. Denton, too, seemed renewed, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "I was so blind," he confided in me one evening as we sat on the porch, basking in the warm summer breeze, "so caught up in trying to maintain the perfect family that I ignored the cracks in the foundation." I reached over, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. "What matters now is that we've found our way back to each other. Alara is thriving, and we can finally move forward as a family, free from Celine's poisonous influence." Denton nodded, his eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and resolve. None of this would have been possible without your strength, Mom. You were the one who refused to let that woman break us. A lump formed in my throat as I thought back to the darkest days when Celine's cruelty seemed inescapable. But in the end, love and perseverance had prevailed, forging us into an unbreakable unit. Over the following months, we settled into a new normal, a life defined not by fear or manipulation, but by genuine love and support. Denton poured his energy into his work and being the best father he could be, while Alara and I rekindled our bond, sharing secrets and laughter like co-conspirators. As I watched them play in the backyard one sun-dappled afternoon, my heart swelled with contentment. This was the life I had always envisioned, a warm, nurturing haven where my family could thrive. In that moment, I silently thanked the universe for granting me the courage to stand firm against the shadows that had once threatened to consume us. It had been a harrowing journey, but we had emerged victorious, our love and resilience shining like a beacon in the darkness. As Alara's joyful giggles floated on the gentle breeze, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, fortified by the unbreakable bonds of family. The shadows were gone, banished forever, and a new dawn had finally arrived. I stepped out of the bedroom, pulling my robe tighter as the chill morning air caressed my skin. The house was eerily quiet, not a single sound to be heard. Theo must have already left for work. Grabbing my coffee mug, I made my way downstairs, my slippered feet sliding across the hardwood floors. That's when I heard the unmistakable voices drifting in from the living room. Theo's deep baritone mingled with the higher, melodic tones of a woman's voice, one I immediately recognized as Dana's. A knot formed in my stomach as I crept closer, my curiosity piqued. "Can't keep doing this, Theo. It's not fair to Lena," Dana whispered, her words laced with remorse. My heart stopped. What did she mean by that? Theo sighed heavily. I know, but you know how much I love you, right? Leaving Lena, it's not that simple." Love her? Leaving me? The mug slipped from my trembling fingers, shattering against the floor with a deafening crash. I froze, panic seizing every fiber of my being. The voices ceased abruptly, followed by hurried footsteps and the slamming of the front door. Dana must have fled. I stood rooted to the spot, numb with shock and disbelief. How could this be happening? Tears stung my eyes as the weight of their words sank in. Theo appeared in the hallway, his expression a mask of guilt and fear. "Lena, you're home? I thought you were at work." "Don't," I warned, my voice quivering with barely contained rage. "Don't you dare try to explain this away." His shoulders sagged in resignation. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." I clenched my fists, fighting back the urge to scream, to lash out. "My husband, and my best friend. How could you betray me like this?" Theo opened his mouth, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "Save it. I don't want to hear your excuses." Brushing past him, I stormed upstairs, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. One thing was certain, I would get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. And when I did, there would be hell to pay. I collapsed onto the bed, hot tears streaming down my face. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? Just hours ago, my life had seemed perfectly normal. A loving marriage, a rewarding career, an amazing best friend. Now it felt like my entire world was crumbling. Theo and I had been together for nearly 15 years, ever since we met in college. We'd had our ups and downs like any couple, but I'd always believed our bond was unbreakable. He was my rock, my support system, the one person I could always count on. Or so I thought. Dana had been my closest confidant for almost as long. We'd shared everything, our hopes, our dreams, our deepest secrets. She was the sister I'd never had. How could they have betrayed me like this? Snatching up my phone, I scrolled through our group chat history, my eyes stinging as I reread our messages. The inside jokes, the plans we'd made, the photos from our girls' nights out, all a lie. My chest tightened as anger and hurt warred within me. "Hey, you up for dinner tonight?" Dana had messaged me just last week. "It's been too long. Too long since what?" I wondered bitterly. "Since you stabbed me in the back?" Tossing my phone aside, I buried my face in my pillow, body-racking sobs shaking my frame. Amidst the torrent of emotions, one thought kept resurfacing. The little things I'd noticed but chosen to ignore. Theo's increasingly late nights at the office, the lingering perfume that clung to his clothes, a scent I didn't recognize, the way he'd grown more distant, more preoccupied in recent months. Fool, I berated myself. How could I have been so blind? Anger reignited within me, burning away the despair. I would not be the naive, clueless wife anymore. Dragging myself out of bed, I began to formulate a plan. If Theo wanted to play games, I'd show him exactly what I was capable of. Grabbing my laptop, I started digging, searching through our shared accounts, poring over phone records, analyzing every last detail of our lives with a calculating eye. I would uncover every sordid lie, every deception, and when I had all the evidence I needed, they would pay. Both of them. No more Mrs. Nice Girl. It was time to fight fire with fire. Over the next few days, I became a woman possessed. Every waking moment was dedicated to gathering evidence against Theo and Dana. I combed through phone records, bank statements, emails, anything that could shed light on their illicit affair. The more I uncovered, the sicker I felt. Countless hotel receipts, dozens of burner phone numbers, even a secret email account Theo had been using to communicate with her. How long had this been going on right under my nose? I needed more. More proof, more ammunition to use against them when the time came to confront their betrayal. Careful not to arouse Theo's suspicions, I suggested upgrading our home security system. With all the break-ins happening in the neighborhood lately, I think we should look into better cameras, I told him over dinner one night. You know, for peace of mind. Theo agreed readily enough, none the wiser as I installed discreet, hidden cameras throughout our house, including the bedroom. 3 days later, I got the evidence I'd been dreading. Theo was supposed to be working late, but the notification from the bedroom camera told a different story. Heart pounding, I pulled up the live feed on my laptop, fingers trembling. There they were, tangled together on our marital bed, locked in a passionate embrace. Dana's hands roamed greedily over my husband's body as he trailed kisses down her neck. The scene was like a dagger to my heart. I slammed the laptop shut, fighting waves of nausea. For a moment, I thought I might be sick. How could they? In our home, in the bed we'd shared for over a decade? White-hot fury blazed through me, burning away the hurt and anguish. They wanted to make a mockery of my marriage? Fine, I'd make them pay dearly for it. Jaw clenched, I began meticulously documenting everything, recording the videos, printing out financial statements, gathering a comprehensive dossier to use as a weapon against them. This was war, and I didn't intend to lose. When Theo finally came home hours later, I forced myself to act normal, keeping my anger tightly leashed. He'd never see the storm coming until it was too late. "Hey babe, sorry I'm so late," he said with a sheepish grin, dropping a kiss on my cheek. Client meetings ran over again. The blatant lie nearly made me snap. Instead, I just smiled thinly. "No worries. I understand how busy you've been lately." His smile faltered at my cool tone, but I didn't care. Let him wonder, let him squirm with guilt and trepidation, because soon Theo would realize just how big of a mistake he'd made. I would make sure of it. With each passing day, the evidence against Theo and Dana piled higher. Secret rendezvous at sleazy motels, hundreds of texts and emails exchanged, many too explicit for me to stomach reading. Financial records showing lavish gifts and getaways charged to our joint accounts. The sheer depth of their deception was staggering. How had I been so blind, so trusting? Naively, I'd believed our marriage was rock solid, while Theo was spinning an intricate web of lies behind my back. Sickened by their brazenness, I began plotting my revenge in earnest. I would confront them, but not before ensuring I had the upper hand. First, I needed an ally, someone just as invested in bringing them down as I was. The answer came in the form of Rick, Dana's poor, unsuspecting husband. "Rick, hey, it's Lena," I said softly when he answered the phone. I need to talk to you about something. It's important." Within the hour, he was at my door, brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on? You sounded really upset on the phone." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I found out that Theo and Dana have been having an affair, for who knows how long." Rick's face drained of color. "What? No, that can't be right. Dana would never." Mutely, I handed him the phone containing all the damning photos and videos, letting the evidence speak for itself. He scrolled in numb silence, the devastation etched into his features, cutting me to the core. This was the ultimate betrayal, and we'd both fallen victim to the same depravity. "That filthy lying whore," Rick spat, hurling the phone across the room with a noise of disgust. "I'll kill her. I'll fucking kill them both." I placed a calming hand on his arm. "Don't do anything rash just yet," I said, keeping my voice level. "That's exactly what they want, to make us the unhinged ones while they play the victims. We need to be smart about this." Rick's eyes bored into mine, blazing with hurt and rage. "What did you have in mind?" A grim smile tugged at my lips. "We catch them together, in person, somewhere very public. Then we make a scene they'll never forget." For the next few days, Rick and I made our preparations, the bitterness and anger fueling our every move. I spearheaded the effort, keeping meticulous track of Theo and Dana's communications to determine the location of their next tryst. When the pieces fell into place, we were ready to strike. Well, fancy meeting you two here," I announced coldly, striding into the upscale restaurant trailed by Rick. My cheating husband and ex-best friend froze like deer in headlights, their perfect romantic evening about to come crashing down. It was time for the ultimate reckoning. In the days leading up to the confrontation, I was a whirlwind of activity. No detail was too small, no loose end left untied. This would be the moment I regained control, the moment I exposed Theo and Dana's reprehensible actions to the world. I made sure to have all my ducks in a row, legally speaking. I met with a high-powered divorce attorney and had the paperwork drawn up, ready to be filed at a moment's notice. My finances were separated, my assets protected. Anything of value that Theo could try to take or destroy in retaliation, precious heirlooms, important documents, I carefully stowed away in a secure location. He wouldn't be able to blindside me like he had before. Then there was the matter of pulling off the perfect scene for our very public reckoning. After some thought, I decided on Marco's, an ultra-romantic, incredibly exclusive restaurant that Theo had been raving about for weeks. Securing a reservation on such short notice took some creativity on my part. "Hi, I'm calling to make a reservation for two under the name Wilson," I told the snooty maitre d' in my sweetest voice. "You see, it's for our anniversary, and my husband has been just so excited about celebrating at your establishment." Dropping Theo's name and embellishing with a few personal details seemed to do the trick. They agreed to squeeze us in for the coveted 8 p.m. slot that Saturday night. With the plan in motion, all that remained was to get Theo and Dana to take the bait. Rick and I kept careful tabs on their communications, tracking their despicable pillow talk until the inevitable dinner date was set. Finally, the momentous evening arrived. I spent hours getting ready, dressing to the nines in my most devastatingly sexy cocktail dress and towering heels. Theo's eyes would be glued to me until the real fireworks began. At 7:30 on the dot, Rick and I strolled into the swanky restaurant side by side, the picture of polished confidence. I scanned the dimly lit dining room until I spotted the unmistakable forms of my husband and ex-best friend cuddled together in a cozy corner booth. Revulsion churned in my gut at the nauseating display. But this was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Locking eyes with Dana across the room, I allowed a slow, vindictive smile to spread across my face. "Showtime," I murmured. They gaped helplessly as Rick and I descended on their table like birds of prey. There would be no more secrets, no more lies this time. Only the bitter truth laid bare for all to see. Well, I sneered, voice dripping with disdain. "Isn't this just precious?" Dana's face drained of color, but Theo simply blinked at me in shock, momentarily speechless. So much for that legendary cool under pressure. "You two make just the cutest couple, don't you think?" I crooned, reaching out to trail a finger down Dana's cheek. She flinched, her disgust palpable. Rick slammed his hands on the table, making them both jump. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't take you both out back and bash your skulls in," he snarled, eyes wild. For a long beat there was only stunned silence. Then Dana found her voice, reaching a shaking hand towards me in entreaty. "Lena, please. This isn't what it looks like. We never meant to hurt you." The deafening crack of my palm across her face cut off her pathetic excuse. Gasps rippled through the hushed dining room. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the maitre d' frantically waving for security. Not that it mattered. The real damage had already been done. "Save your lies," I hissed, leaning in until I could smell the booze on Theo's breath. "Consider this the end of our marriages. You'll be hearing from my lawyer shortly." Turning on my heel, I strode away, Rick at my side. Theo's frantic calls echoed in my wake, but I didn't look back. Not this time. After all, I'd already won. The weeks following the disastrous dinner at Marco's were a whirlwind. Dana and Theo's desperate attempts at damage control fell on deaf ears. Rick and I were done listening to their lies. True to my word, I hired the most ruthless divorce attorney money could buy and filed the paperwork immediately. There would be no last-ditch efforts to save our sham of a marriage. Not after the depths of Theo's betrayal. He tried pleading with me, of course, called and texted incessantly, leaving long, rambling voicemails promising that their affair was over, begging me to give him another chance. "Lena, baby, I was so stupid," he sobbed during one such call, "but it's done, I swear. No more secrets, no more lies, just give me one more shot to make things right." I barely resisted the urge to laugh in his face. After everything, did he really think I was that naive? Dana's approach was more calculated, her messages laced with venom, as the realization set in that I wouldn't be manipulated again. "You're making a huge mistake here, Lena," she warned me one afternoon when I refused to answer her calls. "Theo and I, this is real. More real than whatever little fantasy you've been living in for years. He's going to leave you eventually, you know. Might as well cut your losses now before it gets even uglier." I merely deleted the venomous text without responding. Let the delusional bitch think what she wanted. Her words held no power over me now. Perhaps the most satisfying aspect was seeing the once unflappable Theo squirm under the scrutiny of his pristine reputation being called into question. With cold, calculated precision, I forwarded proof of his infidelity to his bosses, colleagues, business associates, anyone whose opinion of him mattered. The aftermath was deliciously brutal to witness. Meetings and client dinners abruptly canceled. The hush-hush rumors flying fast and furious behind his back. The disgusted, disappointed looks from those who had once admired and respected him. Theo's world was crumbling around him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Rich, too, seemed to find a grim sense of satisfaction in watching Dana suffer. Once a darling of the design world with a thriving business, her standing in the community took a nosedive after the cheating scandal broke. "Projects getting canceled left and right," he told me with a bitter chuckle one evening over drinks. We'd grown closer through our shared trauma, an unshakable alliance born of betrayal. Whoops, did I accidentally forward those incriminating pictures to all her colleagues and clients? My bad. Dana tried to maintain her poise, continuing to spin her web of lies even as it all unraveled around her. "This is just a twisted game Lena's playing," she sneered during a TV interview aimed at doing damage control. "She's unwell, consumed by jealousy and pettiness, all because Theo and I discovered a depth of feeling she could never." Rick's furious bellow cut off her diatribe. "That's enough out of you, you lying sack of shit!" The cameras kept rolling as he stormed onto the set, looming over Dana with clenched fists and blazing eyes. Security scrambled to intervene, but he shook them off with ease. "You think this is a game?" he roared, spittle flying. "You ruined my life, you miserable whore. Both of your lives." "Security," Dana cried, recoiling in terror. "Get him out of here!" Rick's parting words dropped like a lead weight before he allowed himself to be escorted off stage. "Just you wait, Dana. This nightmare's only just beginning for you two." As the disastrous interview played on endless loop across news stations and social media platforms, I understood exactly what he meant. The reckoning had only begun, and Dana and Theo were about to learn that betraying me had been a grave mistake. The divorce proceedings were almost anticlimactic after the nuclear fallout Theo and Dana's affair had caused. With the mountain of evidence I'd painstakingly gathered, my attorney made short work of ensuring I received a generous settlement. "Mr. Wilson's indiscretions have made this one of the more straightforward cases I've encountered," my laser-focused lawyer remarked with a thin smile as we reviewed the final paperwork. He'd be wise not to contest any of the terms. Theo didn't put up a fight, his spirit seemingly broken. The mighty marketing mogul had been reduced to a shell of his former self, his career in tatters, and his reputation utterly destroyed. Serves him right, I thought with a twist of satisfaction. As for Dana, well, let's just say karma came for her with a vengeance, courtesy of her soon-to-be ex-husband, Rick. "You really think parading around with your little boy toy made you happy?" he snarled, looming over her as we divvied up assets. Take a good look, because this is what true misery looks like. With vicious precision, Rick proceeded to dismantle nearly every aspect of Dana's carefully curated life. Her business receivables, her investment accounts, even the house they'd bought together. It all became battleground after battleground, with Rick wielding the full force of the law like a sledgehammer. By the time the dust settled, Dana had been utterly fleeced, left with a pittance of her net worth and her professional reputation in shreds. She deserved every bit of it after her disgusting betrayal. As a final insult, Rick had made sure to leak details of their toxic divorce proceedings to Dana's colleagues and friends, ensuring the juicy gossip would follow her for years to come. The scarlet letter she'd been branded with wouldn't be fading anytime soon. "Utter destitution looks good on you," Rick said with a harsh laugh as Dana was forcibly removed from the home they'd once shared, friends and family watching in mute horror. "But don't worry, at this rate, rock bottom is just around the corner." Her screams of protest were like music to my ears. Every ounce of misery inflicted was vindication, a balm to the gaping wounds she and Theo had inflicted with their selfish actions. As for me, well, I was finally free of the shackles of a toxic marriage, free to spread my wings and soar unburdened by lies and deception. It was an incredibly liberating feeling. Sure, there were still some loose ends to tie up in the wake of the tsunami of chaos caused by exposing Theo's affair. Muttered whispers from former friends followed me in certain social circles, though after witnessing my uncompromising dedication to delivering righteous vengeance, most knew better than to cross me. Then there was the tricky matter of public perception. "Miss Wilson, there have been some rumblings of concern over the heavy-handed tactics used in dissolving your marriage," one particularly bold reporter mentioned during a press junket. "Care to comment on accusations that you went too far?" I simply quirked an eyebrow, unmoved by his needling. "Too far? Please. After having my heart and my life shredded by two people I loved and trusted most?" A slow, razor-edged smile curved my lips. "Darling, I showed incredible restraint. Be grateful your pretty face is still intact." The reporter swallowed hard, his bravado extinguished as I leveled an icy glare in his direction. Satisfied, I turned on my heel and strode away, ready to embrace this new chapter of my life with open arms. Because in the end, despite their best efforts, Theo and Dana hadn't succeeded in breaking me. If anything, their unforgivable transgressions had awoken a merciless fire within, one that would never be extinguished. I was a woman reborn from the ashes of betrayal, and God help anyone who dared to cross me again. The divorce was finalized with ruthless efficiency, just as I'd wanted. Theo put up a meager fight, his lawyers quickly realizing the futility of going toe-to-toe with my legal team and the damning evidence stacked against him. In the end, I walked away with a generous settlement. Not that money could ever undo the profound betrayal I'd suffered. But it was a start, a foundation upon which I could build my new life free from the shackles of lies and deception. As the last remnants of my old life crumbled to dust, I surveyed the wreckage with a strange sense of calm. Yes, there was pain and anger still simmering beneath the surface. But overriding it all was a resilient determination to persevere, to rise like a phoenix from the ashes of heartbreak and humiliation. Theo and Dana's inability to take true accountability for their actions disgusted me. In all the pitiful, rambling apologies and attempts at reconciliation, never once did I detect genuine remorse, merely self-preservation instincts kicking in as the flames licked closer. The truth was, they were both fundamentally rotten people devoid of any true moral fiber, and I was well rid of their toxicity poisoning my existence any longer. With my newfound independence came a reinvigorating sense of purpose. Old hobbies and passions I'd let fall by the wayside were reignited as I reclaimed my identity beyond just being the wife. Evenings once occupied by draining emotional labor were now filled with book club meetings, cooking classes, early morning runs along the waterfront as the sun peeked over the horizon. I relished the solitude, reveling in putting myself first without guilt or obligation. My career also thrived as I poured my energies into new, exciting projects, no longer weighed down by the suffocating resentments of an unhappy home life. Slowly but surely, I rebuilt my world into something uniquely mine, a sanctuary meticulously curated to nurture my soul and bring me peace. There was power in taking back control that Theo and Dana had so carelessly stripped away. The friends who had eagerly turned on me during the scandal quickly realized their overtures would be rebuffed. I had no patience for fair-weather companions seeking to leech off my hard-earned success. My inner circle shrank. But what remained was an unshakable core of supportive, loyal hearts for whom I was eternally grateful. Rick became my closest confidant during those initial tumultuous months. We'd forged an unbreakable bond in the fires of shared trauma and betrayal. Where others in our lives had failed, we uplifted one another, not as self-pity acquaintances, but as respected comrades in arms. To new beginnings, he'd toast each time we met for our weekly drinks, clinking his glass against mine, and to leaving the assholes of our pasts where they belong, in the rearview mirror. I couldn't have said it better myself. My quest for vengeance might have stripped me of some illusions, but it had also reforged me with an indomitable spirit. A battle-hardened heart that would never be so naive as to hand out its trust indiscriminately. The woman I was 6 months ago was gone, banished along with the lies. In her place stood a new iteration, fierce, emboldened, unapologetic in her demands for loyalty and authenticity from those who entered her orbit. I'd been reborn from the fires of my own personal hell, and as I looked toward the hopeful horizon, I greeted the future with the hard-won lessons etched into my very bones. Never again would I be a willing victim of anyone else's deception. My focus was forging ahead, keeping my eyes trained on the winding path before me. Because this time, I held the map, and I alone would decide the journey's destinations. In the dimly lit living room, I sat across from Derek, my husband of 10 years, trying to make sense of the words that had just left his mouth. My house, my rules, Mom's moving in next week. I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. Excuse me, you can't be serious. Derek's expression hardened, his jaw set in a firm line. I'm serious, Elaine. After Dad passed away, Mom has been all alone. It's our responsibility to take care of her now. But why does she have to move in with us? I protested, my voice rising. Couldn't she stay in her own house, or maybe we could hire a caretaker? He shook his head. You know how she is. She'll never agree to that. Besides, it's only temporary until she gets back on her feet. I scoffed, unconvinced by his assurances. Muriel, Derek's mother, was a force to be reckoned with, a domineering, critical woman who had made my life miserable on countless occasions. The thought of her living under the same roof, invading our personal space, filled me with dread. Derek, you can't just make a decision like this without consulting me, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. This is our home, our family. Don't I get a say? His eyes narrowed, and he let out an exasperated sigh. Elaine, don't be so dramatic. It's just for a little while. I'm sure you two can get along if you both make an effort. I wanted to scream, to make him understand how unreasonable his request was, but I knew it would be futile. Derek had always been blind to his mother's manipulative ways, forever caught in her web of guilt and obligation. As I looked into his eyes, filled with a misguided sense of duty, I realized that this was not a battle I could win. Not now, at least. Muriel was coming, and I had no choice but to brace myself for the storm that was about to descend upon our once peaceful household. True to his word, Derek's mother, Muriel, arrived precisely a week later, her presence like a dark cloud looming over our once peaceful home. As she stepped through the door, dragging her overstuffed suitcases behind her, I could already sense the shift in the atmosphere. Well, it's about time, she grumbled, her sharp gaze sweeping over the entryway with clear disdain. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about me. Derek rushed to her side. A forced smile plastered on his face. Of course not, Mom. We're so glad you're here. Muriel waved him off dismissively, her attention zeroing in on me. Elaine, she said, her voice dripping with thinly veiled contempt. I hope you've prepared a proper room for me. I won't be sleeping on some ratty old sofa. I took a deep breath, determined not to let her get under my skin. Not yet, at least. Welcome, Muriel. Your room is already upstairs. Let me show you. As I led her up the stairs, Muriel's critical gaze roamed over every inch of our home, her disapproving snorts and tuts echoing through the hallways. It was as if she was searching for flaws, eager to find something to complain about. Once we reached the guest room, she swept inside, running her finger along the dresser and inspecting it for dust. "I suppose this will have to do," she muttered, clearly unimpressed with my efforts. I bit my tongue, reminding myself that losing my temper would only give her more ammunition. "If you need anything, just let me know," I said, my voice strained with forced politeness. Muriel fixed me with a withering look. "I'm sure I won't," she said, her tone dismissive. "I've raised a family before, you know. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself." Before I could respond, she turned her back on me, effectively ending the conversation. I stood there for a moment, fuming silently, before retreating to the sanctuary of the kitchen. As the days passed, Muriel's presence became increasingly oppressive. She constantly criticized my parenting, my cooking, and my housekeeping skills, belittling me at every opportunity. Derek, caught in the middle, wavered between defending me and placating his mother, often leaving me feeling isolated and unsupported. "Can't you see what she's doing?" I pleaded with him one evening after Muriel had berated me for serving a meal she'd unfit for human consumption. Derek sighed, rubbing his temples wearily. "Mom's just set in her ways, Elaine. You know how she is." "That's no excuse," I shot back, my frustration boiling over. "She's treating me like a servant in my own home, and you're just letting her." His eyes flashed with anger. "Don't start this again. She's my mother, and she's going through a tough time. Can't you just try to be a little more understanding?" I stared at him, incredulous, wondering how a man I had once admired could be so blind to his mother's toxic behavior. In that moment, I realized that if I didn't take a stand, Muriel would continue to erode our relationship, our family, until there was nothing left. With a newfound determination, I resolved to take matters into my own hands. Muriel had declared war, and I had no choice but to fight back, for the sake of my own sanity and the preservation of my marriage. The tensions in our household continued to escalate, with Muriel's presence like a suffocating weight pressing down on us. Just when I thought she couldn't possibly push the boundaries any further, she proved me wrong in the most infuriating way. One morning, as I settled down at the small desk in the corner of the living room to work, Derek approached me with a sheepish expression. "Hey, Elaine, I need to talk to you about something," he said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I glanced up from my laptop, already sensing the impending argument. "What is it?" He cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. "Well, Mom mentioned that she needs a dedicated space to sort through Dad's belongings and handle his affairs, so I thought she could use the office for a little while." My heart sank as the realization dawned on me. "The office? You mean my office, the space I use to work from home?" Derek nodded, his expression apologetic but resolute. "Just temporarily, until she gets everything sorted out. You can work from the living room for now." I stared at him, incredulous. "Derek, you can't be serious. That's my dedicated workspace, where I have my files, my equipment, everything I need to do my job efficiently." "I know, but this is important to Mom," he insisted, his tone pleading. "She's going through a tough time, and we need to be there for her." I clenched my jaw, fighting back the urge to scream in frustration. It was always the same excuse, the same guilt trip, the same blind devotion to his mother's every whim. "And what about me?" I demanded, my voice rising. "What about my needs, my job, my peace of mind in my own home?" Derek's expression hardened, his patience wearing thin. "Elaine, don't make this into a bigger deal than it is. It's just for a little while until Mom gets settled." I wanted to argue, to make him see reason, but I knew it would be futile. Muriel had wormed her way into his mind, convincing him that her demands were more important than my own. With a heavy heart, I begrudgingly packed up my things and relocated to the living room, my once comfortable workspace now reduced to a cramped corner amidst the chaos of our daily lives. As the days passed, the constant interruptions and lack of privacy made it nearly impossible to focus on my work. Muriel seemed to take perverse pleasure in barging into the living room at all hours, critiquing my every move and demanding attention for her latest grievance. "Elaine, have you seen my reading glasses?" she would call out, her tone accusatory. "I can't find them anywhere, and you know how important they are to me." Or she would hover nearby, loudly commenting on my phone calls or the clacking of my keyboard, her presence a constant distraction. "Must you make so much noise?" she would snap, her voice dripping with disdain. "It's giving me a headache." Through it all, Derek remained frustratingly oblivious, either dismissing my concerns or gently chiding me for not being more accommodating. "She's just going through a rough patch," he would say, his eyes pleading with me to understand. "Can't you cut her some slack?" But I had reached my breaking point. Muriel's constant intrusions were not only disrupting my work, but also eroding my sense of self-worth and autonomy. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, trapped by her emotional manipulation and Derek's unwavering loyalty to her. It was then that I realized something had to change. I couldn't continue living like this, constantly walking on eggshells and sacrificing my own well-being for Muriel's sake. If Derek wasn't willing to stand up for me, for our marriage, then I would have to take matters into my own hands. With each passing day, the tension in our home grew thicker, suffocating me with its weight. Muriel's presence had become a constant source of stress, her criticisms and demands chipping away at my sense of self-worth. I knew I couldn't continue living like this, a prisoner in my own home. That's when I started making plans. Late at night, after Derek had gone to bed and Muriel had retreated to her room, I would sit at my makeshift workspace in the living room, scouring the internet for apartment listings. I needed an escape, a place to call my own, where I could breathe freely without the constant fear of Muriel's judgmental gaze. I also reached out to a lawyer, discreetly inquiring about my rights in case of a separation. The thought of leaving Derek was gut-wrenching, but I knew I had to be prepared for the worst. If he couldn't see reason, if he continued to prioritize his mother's whims over our marriage, I might have no choice but to walk away. As the days went by, I started documenting Muriel's behavior, gathering evidence of her manipulation and emotional abuse. I recorded her derogatory comments, cataloged her unreasonable demands, and kept track of the unnecessary expenses she had pressured Derek into covering. It was during one of these covert recording sessions that I stumbled upon a damning piece of evidence. Muriel, unaware that my phone was capturing her every word, launched into a tirade about Derek, spewing venom and disdain for the very son she claimed to cherish. "That boy has always been a disappointment," she sneered, her voice laced with contempt. "Weak-willed and spineless, just like his father. Thank goodness I'm here to set him straight." I listened in stunned silence, my heart pounding in my chest as the truth of her manipulative ways became glaringly obvious. This was never about caring for Derek or helping him through a difficult time. It was about control, pure and simple. With trembling fingers, I saved the recording, knowing that this could be the key to opening Derek's eyes to his mother's true nature. But before I could confront him, I had to plant the seeds of doubt, carefully cultivating the cracks in his unwavering loyalty to Muriel. I started leaving small breadcrumbs for him to find, receipts for unnecessary purchases, snippets of overheard conversations that hinted at her disdain for him, little glimpses into the deception she had woven so expertly. At first, Derek brushed them off, making excuses or downplaying their significance. But as the evidence mounted, I could see the flickers of doubt beginning to take root in his mind. "Elaine, have you noticed anything strange about Mom lately?" he asked one evening, his brow furrowed with concern. I feigned innocence, keeping my expression neutral. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, clearly wrestling with his own thoughts. "I don't know. It's just some of the things she's been saying, the way she's been acting. It's almost like she's a different person." I seized the opportunity, treading carefully but firmly. "Derek, I've been trying to tell you for weeks. Your mother isn't the saint you think she is. She's been manipulating you, playing on your guilt and loyalty to get what she wants." He shook his head, his eyes clouded with denial. "No, that can't be true. She's my mother." With a heavy heart, I realized that it was time to reveal the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over the play button. "Listen to this," I said, bracing myself for the fallout. As Muriel's venomous words filled the room, Derek's face drained of color, his expression shifting from disbelief to anguish. It was a harsh awakening, but one that he desperately needed. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and now it was time to let them grow, no matter how painful the process might be. I steeled myself for the confrontation that was to come, knowing that the road ahead would be rocky, but determined to fight for our family's well-being, no matter the cost. With the seeds of doubt planted firmly in Derek's mind, I knew it was time to take the next step in my plan. Muriel's manipulative hold over him was starting to crack, and I needed to capitalize on that before she had a chance to regain control. I became more brazen in my efforts, leaving tangible evidence of her deception scattered around the house for Derek to stumble upon. A receipt for an extravagant purchase she had pressured him into making, a scathing email she had written about him behind his back, small glimpses into the web of lies she had so carefully woven. At first, Derek would confront me, his eyes clouded with confusion and denial. "Elaine, what is this? Why are you trying to turn me against my own mother?" But I would remain steadfast, gently reminding him of the truths he had already begun to uncover. "Derek, you know what she's capable of. You heard those recordings yourself. I'm just trying to open your eyes to the reality of the situation." Slowly but surely, the evidence began to pile up, creating a mountain of doubt that even Derek couldn't ignore. I could see the turmoil brewing within him, the internal struggle between his unwavering loyalty to his mother and the harsh realities he was being forced to confront. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he confessed one night, his voice heavy with anguish. "Everything I thought I knew about her, about our relationship, it's all crumbling." I reached out and squeezed his hand, offering what little comfort I could. "I know this is hard, Derek, but you have to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be." As the days passed, the tension in our home reached a boiling point. Muriel, sensing that her grip on Derek was slipping, became increasingly hostile and confrontational, lashing out at me with renewed venom. "You ungrateful wretch," she spat one afternoon, her eyes blazing with fury. "After everything I've done for this family, you dare to turn my own son against me?" I met her gaze unflinchingly, no longer cowering from her wrath. "I'm not turning anyone against you, Muriel. You're doing that all on your own with your lies and manipulation." She recoiled as if I had struck her, her face contorting into a mask of rage. "How dare you speak to me like that? Derek, control your wife before I'm forced to take matters into my own hands." But Derek remained silent, his expression a mixture of guilt and resolution. For the first time, he wasn't rushing to his mother's defense, wasn't placating her demands or falling prey to her emotional blackmail. Muriel seemed to sense the shift in the dynamic, her eyes darting between us with a mixture of disbelief and fear. "Derek? Derek, say something!" But he simply shook his head, his gaze heavy with a newfound clarity. "I think you should leave, Mom. This has gone too far." The words hung in the air like a death knell, shattering the illusion of control that Muriel had so carefully cultivated. For a moment, she was rendered speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a gasping fish. Then, with a snarl of pure venom, she rounded on me. "You did this. You poisoned his mind against me, you manipulative harpy." I held my ground, refusing to be intimidated by her outburst. "I didn't have to do anything, Muriel. You showed Derek your true colors all on your own." With a wordless shriek of rage, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Derek and I stood there, frozen, the weight of what had just transpired settling over us like a thick blanket. It was a pivotal moment, a turning point in our battle against Muriel's toxic influence. The confrontation had been explosive, but it had also been a necessary step in reclaiming our lives, our autonomy, and our sense of self-worth. As I looked at Derek, his shoulders slumped with the weight of 1,000 emotional burdens, I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. But for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope, a hope that we could emerge from this ordeal stronger, more resilient, and more united than ever before. The aftermath of Derek's confrontation with Muriel was like a powder keg, the tension in our home reaching a fever pitch. For days, an uneasy silence hung in the air, punctuated only by the occasional outburst from Muriel's room, where she had barricaded herself, spewing vitriol and threats. "You'll regret this, Derek," she would scream, her voice shrill and unhinged. "Mark my words, you'll come crawling back, begging for my forgiveness." Derek, for his part, remained steadfast in his resolve, though the weight of his decision was etched in the deep lines on his face and the haunted look in his eyes. "I can't believe it's come to this," he confessed to me one night, his voice heavy with a mixture of sadness and disbelief. "She's my mother, Elaine. How could she be so manipulative, toxic?" I offered, my tone gentle but firm. Derek, you can't keep making excuses for her behavior. You saw the truth with your own eyes, heard it with your own ears. He nodded, running a hand through his hair in a weary gesture. I know, but it's a lot to process. You know, my entire life she's been this constant presence, this force that I've always looked up to, always tried to please. And now, to have that all come crashing down. I reached out and took his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. I understand, believe me. But you made the right choice, Derek. You stood up for yourself, for us, for our family. That takes courage. He managed a faint smile, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and resolve. I couldn't have done it without you, Elaine. You never gave up on me, even when I was too blind to see the truth. In that moment, I felt a surge of pride and affection for this man who had finally found the strength to break free from his mother's toxic grip. It had been a long, arduous journey, but we had weathered the storm together, our bond forged stronger in the crucible of adversity. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity as we prepared for Muriel's departure. Derek made arrangements for her to stay in a short-term rental while she sorted out her living situation, and I packed her belongings, careful to avoid any further confrontations. The day she was scheduled to leave, Muriel emerged from her room like a vengeful spirit, her eyes blazing with fury and her lips twisted into a snarl. "You'll pay for this, Elaine," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. Not by a long shot." I met her gaze unflinchingly, refusing to be intimidated by her empty threats. "It's over, Muriel. You've lost, and it's time for you to leave." She opened her mouth to respond, but Derek stepped forward, his expression resolute. "Enough, Mom. It's time to go." For a moment, I thought she might lash out, her rage bubbling just beneath the surface. But then, with a final withering glare in my direction, she turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her with a force that rattled the windows. As the sound of her car faded into the distance, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a burden that had been pressing down on me for far too long. Derek pulled me into his arms, and we held each other tightly, savoring the newfound peace and quiet that enveloped our home. "It's over," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "She's gone." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief mixed with a twinge of sadness. As toxic as Muriel had been, she was still Derek's mother, and her absence left a void that would take time to heal. But in that moment, all I could focus on was the future, a future free from her manipulation, her cruelty, her poisonous influence. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild our lives on our own terms, and I was determined to make the most of it. With Muriel gone, the battle had been won. But the war, the struggle to reclaim our autonomy and our sense of self-worth, was just beginning. With Muriel's departure, a sense of uneasy calm settled over our home. The air felt lighter, the tension that had once choked us finally dissipating. But even in her absence, her toxic legacy lingered, casting a shadow over our newfound peace. Derek, in particular, seemed to be struggling with the aftermath of their confrontation. He would often retreat into a pensive silence, his brow furrowed as if grappling with some internal turmoil. "Are you okay?" I would ask, my voice gentle, probing. He would nod, forcing a tight smile. Yeah, I'm fine. Just processing everything, you know." But I could see the pain in his eyes, the weight of a lifetime of manipulation and emotional abuse finally bearing down on him. Muriel may have been gone, but her hold on him ran deep, like twisted roots that would take time and effort to untangle. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, the silence stretched between us, heavy and oppressive. Derek fidgeted, his fingers drumming an agitated rhythm on the arm of the couch. "I should talk to her," he blurted out suddenly, his voice tinged with a mixture of determination and trepidation. I looked at him, puzzled. "Talk to who? Muriel?" He nodded, his jaw set in a firm line. I need to understand, to get some closure, I guess." I hesitated, uncertain. "Derek, are you sure that's a good idea? After everything she's put us through?" He ran a hand through his hair, his expression conflicted. I know, but she's still my mother, Elaine. I can't just cut her out of my life without at least trying to make sense of it all." I studied his face, seeing the raw emotions swirling behind his eyes. As much as I wanted to protest, to shield him from the potential hurt and manipulation that could arise from such a confrontation, I knew this was something he needed to do for himself. Okay, I relented, reaching out to give his hand a reassuring squeeze. Just be careful, all right? Don't let her pull you back into her web of lies. He managed a small smile, his eyes filled with gratitude. I won't. I promise. The next day, Derek set out to meet with Muriel, a steely resolve in his demeanor. I could only hope that this encounter would bring him the closure he sought, rather than reigniting the trauma of her toxic influence. Hours ticked by, each minute stretching out like an eternity as I waited, my mind plagued by 1,000 anxious thoughts. What if she managed to manipulate him again? What if her venom seeped back into his psyche, undoing all the progress we had made? Finally, the sound of Derek's car pulling into the driveway snapped me out of my worried reverie. I rushed to the door, my heart pounding in my chest, bracing myself for whatever emotional turmoil awaited. The moment Derek stepped inside, I knew something had shifted. His face was pale, his expression haunted, as if he had witnessed something profoundly disturbing. "Derek? What happened?" I asked, my voice laced with concern. He shook his head slowly, his eyes distant and unfocused. She didn't even try to deny it, Elaine, not really." I furrowed my brow, confused. "Deny what?" Wordlessly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he navigated to a recording. With a tap of the screen, Muriel's voice filled the room, harsh and unapologetic. "You're a fool, Derek," she sneered, her words laced with venom. "A weak, spineless fool, just like your father. Did you really think I cared about you, or that pathetic excuse for a wife of yours? I only ever wanted control, and you handed it to me on a silver platter." I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth as the full weight of her cruelty washed over me. But Muriel was just getting started, her tirade growing more venomous with each passing second. "You're nothing without me, Derek," she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. "You'll come crawling back, begging for my forgiveness, just like you always do. And when you do, I'll be there, ready to take back what's rightfully mine." The recording ended, but her words seemed to linger in the air, a poisonous miasma that threatened to suffocate us both. Derek stood there, frozen, his eyes brimming with a mixture of anguish and disbelief. She never loved me," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Not really, I was just a pawn in her twisted game of control." In that moment, my heart broke for the man I loved, for the lifetime of emotional abuse he had endured at the hands of the woman who was supposed to love and nurture him unconditionally. I stepped forward, wrapping my arms around him in a fierce embrace, offering what little comfort I could. "I'm so sorry, Derek," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. "You didn't deserve any of this." He clung to me, his body shaking with silent sobs as the weight of Muriel's betrayal finally crashed down upon him. It was a harsh awakening, a brutal reckoning with the toxic reality that had been his entire life up until this point. As we stood there, holding each other in the wreckage of our shattered illusions, I knew that the road to healing would be long and arduous. But we would walk it together, one step at a time, towards a future free from Muriel's poisonous influence. It was the end of an era, the closing of a chapter that had been marred by pain and manipulation, and though the scars would linger, we had emerged from the fire tempered, stronger, and more resilient than ever before. In the weeks that followed Muriel's departure, Derek and I found ourselves navigating uncharted waters. The revelation of her true nature had left deep scars, and the process of healing and rebuilding our lives was a slow, often painful journey. At first, Derek retreated into himself, his eyes haunted by the weight of a lifetime of emotional manipulation. He would spend hours sitting in silence, his mind consumed by the echoes of Muriel's poisonous words. "How could I have been so blind?" he would murmur, his voice laced with a mixture of anguish and self-recrimination. "All those years she was just using me, controlling me, and I let her." During those dark moments, I would hold him close, offering what little comfort I could. "You're not to blame, Derek. She's the one who betrayed your trust, who abused your love and loyalty." Slowly, through countless conversations and late-night heart-to-hearts, the fog of denial began to lift. Derek started to see Muriel's actions for what they truly were, a twisted game of power and control, fueled by her own toxic insecurities and selfishness. As the weeks turned into months, we took small steps towards reclaiming our lives, our autonomy, and our sense of self-worth. Derek cut off all contact with Muriel, severing the toxic ties that had bound him for far too long. "I can't have her in my life anymore," he declared, his voice firm and resolute. "Not after everything she's done, everything she's put us through." I nodded, understanding the weight of his decision. "It's for the best. You need time and space to heal, to rebuild yourself without her poisonous influence." With Muriel effectively exiled from our lives, we turned our focus inward, working on strengthening the bonds of our own relationship. We sought out counseling, a neutral space where we could openly confront the trauma and emotional turmoil we had endured. "Communication is key," our therapist would remind us gently. "Don't let resentment or misunderstandings fester. Be open, be honest, and above all, be patient with each other." It was a journey of self-discovery, a process of peeling back the layers of hurt and dysfunction that Muriel had sown within us. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns threatened to resurface, but we confronted them head-on, determined to break the cycle of toxicity once and for all. As for Muriel, her life took an unexpected turn. Cut off from Derek's financial support and unable to manipulate her way into a cushy living situation, she found herself struggling to find a place that would accommodate her without demanding funds she no longer had access to. "She's been calling, begging for money," Derek confided in me one evening, his expression a mixture of pity and resolve. "Apparently, she's burned through her savings and can't afford the fancy retirement community she had her eye on." I shook my head, feeling a twinge of sadness amidst the satisfaction of seeing her reap the consequences of her actions. "What did you tell her?" Derek's jaw tightened, his eyes steely. "That she made her bed, and now she has to lie in it. I'm done enabling her toxic behavior." In the end, Muriel had no choice but to swallow her pride and accept a place in a modest, no-frills retirement home, a far cry from the lavish lifestyle she had envisioned for herself. It was a bitter pill for her to swallow, a harsh lesson in the karmic consequences of her manipulative ways. As for Derek and me, we emerged from the ashes of our ordeal stronger, more resilient, and more united than ever before. The scars of Muriel's emotional abuse would never fully heal, but we had found a way to move forward, to reclaim our lives and our happiness on our own terms. In the quiet moments, when the weight of the past threatened to overwhelm us, we would turn to each other, drawing strength and solace from the bond we had forged through fire and adversity. "We made it," Derek would whisper, his eyes shining with a mix of wonder and gratitude. "Against all odds, we made it through." And in those moments, I knew that no matter what challenges life threw our way, we would face them together. Our love and resilience a beacon guiding us towards a future of our own making. A future free from the toxic grip of Muriel's manipulation, forever. The only sound louder than my pounding heart was the crashing of a porcelain vase, shattered by her words. "You think you can waltz into this family with your middle-class values and change us?" Vivian Ward's eyes narrowed as she glared at me across the table. "This empire was built on sacrifice, and you'll never understand what that means." I froze, my fork hovering over the plate, the candlelight casting flickering shadows across Vivian's imperious features. Elliot's hand found mine under the table, a silent reassurance, but I could feel the tension radiating from him. "Mother, please," Elliot said, his voice strained. "Mira is my fiancée. She's not trying to change anything." "Isn't she?" Vivian's gaze shifted to her son, her expression a mixture of disdain and pity. "You've always been the idealistic one, blind to the realities of our world." Alana, Elliot's younger sister, smirked from across the table, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the polished mahogany. "I tried to warn you, Eli," she said, using the childhood nickname I knew he despised. "But you never listen." I wanted to respond, to defend myself, but the words caught in my throat. This was supposed to be a simple family dinner, a chance for me to get to know Elliot's family better before our wedding. Instead, it felt like a gauntlet had been thrown, and I was woefully unprepared for the battle. "Enough," Elliot said, his voice firm. He pushed back his chair and stood, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the table. "Mira is a part of my life now, and if you can't accept that, then I'm done trying to please you." A heavy silence settled over the room, punctuated only by the ticking of an antique clock. Vivian's expression remained impassive, but I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes, calculating her next move. Finally, she let out a soft sigh and rose from her chair, the picture of aristocratic grace. "Very well," she said, her tone deceptively light. "It's your life, after all." She turned and swept out of the room, her silk gown rustling behind her. Alana followed, pausing only to shoot me a look of pure venom before disappearing into the shadows of the cavernous mansion. Elliot sank back into his chair, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I should have warned you about how they can be." I reached across the table and took his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "It's okay," I said, mustering a reassuring smile. "We'll get through this together." But even as the words left my lips, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, a whisper of the storm that was to come. The drive back to our apartment was tense, the silence punctuated only by the occasional hiss of a passing car on the rain-slicked streets. Elliot's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched tight. "Are you going to tell me what that was all about?" I asked finally, unable to bear the weight of the unspoken any longer. Elliot let out a heavy sigh, his shoulders sagging. "I should have warned you," he said, his voice laced with regret. "My family, they're a lot to handle." "That's an understatement," I muttered, thinking back to the cutting remarks and barely veiled hostility. "Your mother was downright vicious." "She's always been that way," Elliot said, his tone weary. "Controlling, manipulative, she'll do whatever it takes to maintain her grip on the family business." I frowned, realization dawning. "The real estate empire? That's what this is all about?" Elliot nodded, his expression grim. "It's a multi-billion-dollar operation built on decades of shady deals and cutthroat tactics. My father—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Let's just say things weren't always so rosy behind closed doors." A chill ran down my spine at the implication. "What happened to your father?" For a long moment, Elliot was silent, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. When he finally spoke, his words sent a shiver down my spine. "He died under mysterious circumstances when I was a teenager. Vivian always claimed it was an accident, but I've never been so sure." I reached across the console, resting my hand on his arm. "Elliot, that's horrible. Why didn't you tell me?" He let out a mirthless chuckle. "And risk scaring you off? Mira, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you." My heart ached for him, for the pain and mistrust that had been woven into the fabric of his life. In that moment, I knew I had to be strong for both of us. "You're not going to lose me," I said firmly, giving his arm a gentle squeeze. "We're in this together, no matter what your family throws at us." Elliot's gaze met mine, and I saw a flicker of hope amidst the turmoil. "Thank you," he said softly, his fingers intertwining with mine. "I don't know what I'd do without you." As we pulled into the apartment complex, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the precipice of something far greater than either of us could imagine. The masks were slipping, and the true nature of Elliot's family was starting to reveal itself, a tangled web of deceit and manipulation that threatened to ensnare us both. But in that moment, all I knew was that I loved Elliot with every fiber of my being, and I would do whatever it took to protect him from the shadows that loomed over his past. The shrill ringing of my phone shattered the stillness of our apartment. Elliot was at work, and I had been grading papers, trying to lose myself in the familiar routine, but the incessant buzzing made it impossible to focus. "Hello?" I answered, a hint of irritation creeping into my voice. "Mira?" It was Elliot, his tone laced with urgency. "You need to get out of the apartment right now." My heart skipped a beat. "What? Why? What's going on?" "Just trust me," he pleaded. "Get out and meet me at the coffee shop down the street. I'll explain everything." Without another word, he hung up, leaving me with a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. I grabbed my purse and keys, my hands trembling as I rushed out the door. The coffee shop was only a block away, but the walk felt like an eternity. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. Had something happened to Elliot? Was this somehow connected to the ominous revelations about his family? When I finally reached the shop, Elliot was already there, pacing back and forth in front of the entrance. His face was pale, his eyes haunted. "Elliot, what's going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "You're scaring me." He took a deep breath, steeling himself. Our apartment was ransacked, completely trashed. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I stumbled back a step. What? How? Why? Elliot's jaw clenched, his expression hardening. It was my mother, I'm sure of it. A warning shot, probably because of what happened at dinner. I felt dizzy, sick to my stomach. But why would she do something like that? That's insane. Elliot shook his head, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resignation. You don't know her like I do, Mira. She's capable of anything when she feels threatened. In that moment, I saw a glimpse of the pain and fear that had been etched into Elliot's soul, a legacy of his family's twisted dysfunction. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that we were in over our heads. We need to get away from her, I said, my voice trembling. Cut ties completely before things escalate even further. Elliot's expression hardened, a steely resolve settling over his features. You're right. It's the only way we'll ever be free of her grip. He reached out, taking my hand in his. His touch was warm, grounding, a reminder of the love that bound us together. I won't let her hurt you, Mira, he vowed, his eyes boring into mine with an intensity that took my breath away. Not anymore. As we stood there, hand in hand, I knew that our lives had been irrevocably changed. The shadows were gathering, and there was no turning back. But together, we would face the storm head-on, no matter the cost. The motel room was a far cry from the luxurious mansions Elliot's family occupied, but it felt like a sanctuary, a haven from the storm that had engulfed our lives. We had packed our essentials and disappeared without a trace, determined to sever all ties with Vivian and her toxic web of manipulation. Are you sure about this? I asked, watching as Elliot set up the laptop on the rickety table. There's no going back after we start digging. Elliot's jaw tightened, his eyes steely with resolve. She's gone too far this time, Mira. We need to be prepared for whatever she throws at us next. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. We had agreed to gather as much evidence as possible about Vivian's nefarious activities, hoping to use it as leverage to keep her at bay. But the thought of directly confronting such a powerful and ruthless adversary filled me with dread. Elliot's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing a series of encrypted files and secured databases. I watched in awe as he navigated the digital labyrinth with expert precision. A world of secrets and hidden truths unfolding before our eyes. Holy shit, he muttered, his brow furrowing. Look at this. I leaned closer, my breath catching in my throat. The screen was filled with financial records, account statements, and wire transfers, a Byzantine web of transactions that seemed to implicate Alana in a series of shady business deals. Your sister's involved? I whispered, my mind reeling. Elliot's expression darkened. Looks like it. And if she's in on it, you can bet Mom's pulling the strings. We spent hours scouring through the digital paper trail, uncovering layer after layer of deceit and fraud. Real estate schemes, money laundering, even whispers of connections to organized crime, it seemed the depths of Vivian's depravity knew no bounds. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, I felt a chill run down my spine. We were dealing with forces far more sinister than I could have ever imagined, and the implications were staggering. What are we going to do? I asked, my voice trembling. Elliot's gaze was resolute, his jaw set in a hard line. We're going to take her down once and for all, at the estate auction next month, in front of everyone she's ever tried to impress. My heart skipped a beat. Are you sure that's wise? She's already shown how far she'll go to protect her empire. Elliot reached across the table, taking my hand in his. I'm done living in fear, Mira, and with you by my side, I know we can weather any storm. As our fingers intertwined, I felt a surge of strength and determination wash over me. We had uncovered the truth, seen the rot that festered at the heart of Elliot's family legacy, and now it was time to let the light in, no matter the cost. The weeks leading up to the estate auction were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Elliot and I pored over the mountain of evidence we had amassed, meticulously organizing it into an airtight case against Vivian and her criminal empire. This has to be bulletproof, Elliot muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration as he cross-referenced financial statements and email trails. One crack in our narrative, and she'll find a way to slither out. I nodded grimly, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The stakes had never been higher, and the thought of facing Vivian's wrath sent shivers down my spine. As the date of the auction drew closer, The tension became palpable. Elliot was like a coiled spring, his every move charged with a barely contained fury. I knew he was haunted by the ghosts of his past, the lingering specter of his father's untimely death fueling his quest for justice. One night, as we sat hunched over the laptop in our makeshift war room, I stumbled upon a file that stopped me in my tracks. It was a series of encrypted emails, detailing a series of transactions and meetings that seemed to implicate Vivian in far more than just financial crimes. "Elliot," I whispered, my voice trembling, "I think I know what happened to your father." He stiffened, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. "What did you find?" I swallowed hard, steeling myself for the revelation. "These emails, they suggest that your mother orchestrated his death, that she had him killed to gain full control of the empire." For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the air, the weight of my words sinking in. Then, Elliot's expression hardened, his jaw clenched with a fury I had never seen before. "That monster," he growled, his hands curling into fists. "She'll pay for this, for everything she's done." I reached out, resting my hand on his arm in a gesture of comfort and solidarity. "We'll make sure of it," I promised, my voice steely with determination. In the days that followed, we refined our plan, meticulously choreographing every move and contingency. The auction would be our stage, a public spectacle where we would strip away the veneer of respectability that Vivian had so carefully cultivated. As the big day dawned, I could feel the weight of destiny bearing down upon us. We had traversed a gauntlet of lies and betrayal, confronting the darkest aspects of human nature. But in the end, our love for one another and our unwavering pursuit of justice would be our guiding light through the storm. With Elliot by my side, I knew we were ready to face the maelstrom. The echoes of deceit would be silenced, once and for all. The grand ballroom was awash in the soft glow of chandeliers, the air thick with the heady aroma of wealth and privilege. Elliot's family had spared no expense for this high-profile event, a lavish auction to showcase their vast real estate holdings. As we stepped into the opulent space, our footsteps muffled by the plush carpet, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was it, the moment of reckoning we had been building towards for months. Vivian was holding court near the front, resplendent in a designer gown that likely cost more than my annual salary. Her perfectly coiffed hair and immaculate makeup couldn't quite mask the ruthless glint in her eyes, a predator surveying her domain. Alana hovered nearby, draped in jewels and simpering obsequiously at the assembled power brokers and socialites. It was a sickening display of naked ambition and greed, the twisted legacy of a family rotten to the core. Elliot's hand found mine, his grip firm and reassuring. "Are you ready for this?" he murmured, his voice low and intense. I met his gaze, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. "Let's end this, once and for all." We made our way through the crowd, politely declining flutes of champagne from circulating waiters. As we drew closer to the center of the action, I could feel the weight of Vivian's stare boring into us, her perfectly sculpted brow furrowing in a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Finally, we stood before her, the distance between us charged with a palpable tension. Her eyes narrowed as she took us in, a thin veneer of civility barely concealing the venom beneath. "Elliot," she purred, her voice laced with disdain, "how unexpected. And you've brought your little plaything, I see." Elliot's jaw tightened, his free hand curling into a fist at his side. "Cut the act, mother. We know everything." A ripple of hushed murmurs spread through the crowd, the assembled guests sensing the impending storm. Vivian's mask of composure slipped for just a moment, a flicker of unease passing across her features. "I don't know what you think you know," she hissed, her eyes flashing with barely contained fury. "But you would be wise to mind your tongue, boy." In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. With a deep breath, I reached into my purse and withdrew the damning evidence we had gathered, a meticulously compiled dossier detailing Vivian's web of deceit and criminality. "It's all here," I said, my voice ringing out with a clarity that surprised even me. "The fraud, the money laundering, the illegal business dealings, and the truth about your husband's death." The silence that followed was deafening, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Vivian's eyes widened, her perfectly sculpted mask cracking as the realization of her exposed sins sank in. Then, like a dam bursting, the chaos erupted. The aftermath of the auction was a whirlwind of chaos and confusion. Vivian and Alana were both taken into custody, their faces twisted into masks of rage and disbelief as they were led away in handcuffs. The assembled guests scattered like startled pigeons, let the veneer of high society stripped away to reveal the sordid underbelly beneath. As for Elliot and I, we were left to pick up the pieces of the empire that had nearly destroyed us. The legal battles raged on, but we had emerged victorious, the truth laid bare for all to see. In the days and weeks that followed, we found ourselves the subject of intense scrutiny and speculation. The media frenzy was relentless, with reporters and photographers camped outside our door, hungry for any scrap of information about the downfall of the once mighty Ward dynasty. Through it all, Elliot remained my rock, a steadfast pillar of strength and determination. His eyes burned with a newfound intensity, a fire stoked by the memory of his father and the injustices that had festered for far too long. "We have to make sure this never happens again," he said one night, as we sat in the dimly lit living room of our new apartment, the weight of our shared ordeal hanging heavy in the air. "Too many lives have been ruined by greed and corruption." I nodded, my heart swelling with pride and admiration for the man I loved. "What did you have in mind?" Elliot's gaze was resolute, his jaw set in a firm line. "A foundation in my father's name, a place where victims of white-collar crimes can find support and advocacy." The idea resonated deeply within me, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness we had endured. "It's perfect," I said, reaching out to take his hand in mine. "A legacy of justice and redemption." As we began to lay the groundwork for the foundation, a sense of purpose and renewal took root within us. We had been forged in the crucible of deception and betrayal, but we had emerged stronger, more resilient. The road ahead was long and arduous, but with each hurdle we cleared, I felt the weight of our past lifting. The shadows that had once loomed so large were receding, replaced by the warm glow of a future filled with promise and possibility. And through it all, our bond only grew stronger. We had faced the darkness together, and in doing so, we had discovered a love that could withstand any storm. A love built on trust, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to justice. As the sun set on that chapter of our lives, I found myself filled with a profound sense of gratitude for the strength we had found within ourselves and for the unbreakable bond that had carried us through the echoes of deceit. The past year had been a whirlwind of change, both exhilarating and exhausting in equal measure. As Elliot and I stood in the sleek modern offices of the newly restructured Ward Enterprises, it was hard to believe how far we had come. "Are you ready for this?" Elliot asked, his voice a mix of trepidation and excitement. I took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. "As ready as I'll ever be." With Vivian and Alana behind bars and their ill-gotten empire dismantled, we had been tasked with the monumental challenge of rebuilding from the ashes. It was a daunting prospect, but one we were determined to see through. The first order of business was to purge the company of the rot that had taken hold, severing ties with the crooked business partners and shady investors who had enabled Vivian's criminal enterprises. It was a painful process, but a necessary one. "We're going to do things differently," Elliot declared in our first meeting with the remaining senior staff. "No more shortcuts, no more turning a blind eye to unethical practices. From now on, we operate with integrity and transparency." His words were met with a mixture of uncertainty and relief. Some saw it as a much-needed course correction, while others feared the potential financial fallout. But Elliot was unwavering, his conviction bolstered by the memory of the injustices that had nearly torn our lives apart. As the weeks turned into months, we began to lay the foundation for a new era at Ward Enterprises. We restructured the company's holdings, divesting from shady real estate deals and instead focusing on legitimate development projects that would benefit local communities. It wasn't always easy. There were setbacks and obstacles at every turn. But through it all, Elliot's determination never wavered, and I found myself buoyed by his unwavering commitment to doing the right thing. "You know," I said one evening as we sat side by side on the balcony of our new penthouse apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. "When all of this started, I never could have imagined we'd end up here." Elliot chuckled, taking a sip of his wine. "You and me both. but I wouldn't change a thing. I leaned in, resting my head on his shoulder. Even with everything we went through? His arms slipped around my waist, pulling me closer. Especially because of that. It made us stronger, more resilient, and it reminded me of what's really important. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead was sure to be filled with challenges and obstacles, but for the first time in a long time, I felt truly hopeful about the future. We had faced the echoes of deceit head-on, and in doing so, we had forged a new path, one built on integrity, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to justice. And as long as we walked that path together, I knew that no storm, no matter how fierce, could ever break us. The clinking of silverware against plates filled the air, accompanied by the low murmur of conversation and the occasional burst of laughter. It was a familiar scene, one that had played out countless times before during our family's Thanksgiving gatherings. Yet, as I sat at the table, savoring each bite of my mom's famous pumpkin pie, a sense of unease crept over me. Evan excused himself from the table, and I watched as he made his way towards the kitchen, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. Elsie, my younger sister, followed soon after, a forced smile plastered on her face as she mumbled something about needing to check on the dishes. Curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself drifting towards the kitchen, my steps muffled by the plush carpet. As I drew closer, hushed voices reached my ears, laced with tension and urgency. "Can't keep doing this, Evan," Elsie hissed, her words laced with a mixture of anger and pain. "It's tearing me apart." My heart stuttered in my chest, and I froze, my mind racing to make sense of what I was hearing. Evan's voice was low and strained. "I know, Els, but you have to understand how complicated this is. I can't just walk away from my marriage, from everything I've built with Marla." The air seemed to grow thicker, suffocating me with each passing second. My sister and my husband. The implications of their words hit me like a freight train, shattering the carefully constructed reality I had been living in. "You promised me," Elsie whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "You said you loved me, that we'd find a way to be together." A deafening silence followed, punctuated only by the rapid pounding of my heart. I wanted to confront them, to demand answers, but my feet remained rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the weight of their betrayal. Finally, Evan spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. "I'm sorry, Elsie. I never meant to hurt you, but I can't do this anymore. It has to stop." The sound of footsteps approaching jolted me back to reality, and I scrambled away from the kitchen, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. As I rejoined the others at the table, plastering a fake smile on my face, I couldn't help but wonder how long this had been going on, how deep the deception ran. One thing was certain. The life I thought I had, the marriage I had built with Evan, was nothing but a carefully crafted illusion, and in that moment I vowed to unravel the truth, no matter how painful it might be. In the days that followed, a dark cloud seemed to loom over our once happy home. Evan's behavior grew increasingly strange, his once warm and attentive demeanor replaced by a distant, guarded persona. He would disappear for hours, claiming work emergencies, only to return with a haunted look in his eyes. One night, as I lay awake in bed, staring at the shadows dancing across the ceiling, I heard the faint buzz of Evan's phone vibrating on the nightstand. Curiosity burned within me, and before I could stop myself, I reached for the device, my fingers trembling slightly. The screen lit up, revealing a series of text messages from an unknown number. My heart sank as I read the words, each one a dagger twisting deeper into my heart. "I miss you so much. When can we meet again?" The messages were laced with intimacy, the kind reserved for lovers, not mere acquaintances. Bile rose in my throat as the realization dawned on me. Evan was having an affair. In that moment, I felt like a fool, a naive plaything in whatever sick game he was playing. Anger coursed through my veins, fueling a determination I hadn't known existed within me. The next morning I confronted Evan, thrusting his phone into his face, the damning messages displayed for all to see. "Care to explain this?" I spat, my voice laced with venom. Evan's eyes widened, and for a fleeting moment I saw a flicker of guilt cross his features, but it was quickly replaced by a mask of defiance, his jaw clenched tight. "It's not what you think," he said, his tone dismissive. "It's just a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding? I scoffed, incredulous. Don't insult my intelligence, Evan. I know what's going on and I want the truth. He hesitated, his gaze shifting away from mine, as if he couldn't bear to face the weight of his own deception. Marla, He trailed off, his voice faltering. Don't bother, I snapped, holding up a hand to silence him. I don't want to hear your excuses. I want answers, and I want them now. Evan's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I thought he might come clean, might offer some semblance of an explanation. But then his expression hardened, and he straightened his spine, meeting my gaze with a defiant stare. Fine, he said, his voice low and cold. You want the truth? I've been seeing someone else. Happy now? His words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of my lungs. Despite my suspicions, hearing him admit to his infidelity was like a knife twisting in my gut. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall, refused to show any weakness in the face of his betrayal. Who is she? I demanded, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. Evan's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment I thought he might refuse to answer. But then, he uttered a single word that shattered my world into a million pieces. Elsie. The revelation that Evan's affair was with my own sister hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt sick to my stomach, the world spinning around me as the weight of their betrayal threatened to crush me. Elsie had been my confidant, my closest friend since childhood. We had shared everything, or so I thought. Now the bond we once cherished lay in tatters, ripped apart by her selfish actions. How could you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper as I fought back the tears that burned in my eyes. Evan remained silent, his expression a mixture of defiance and shame. It was Elsie who spoke, her voice trembling with a mix of guilt and what sounded like desperation. Marla, please, let me explain. I whirled around to face her, fury blazing in my chest. Explain? What could you possibly say to justify this? You're my sister. Evan is my husband. This is unforgivable. Elsie flinched as if I had struck her, but she pressed on, her eyes pleading with me to understand. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Evan and I have always had a connection, a spark that neither of us could deny. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. A connection? You betrayed me in the worst possible way. How am I supposed to trust either of you ever again? We never meant to hurt you, Evan said, his voice low and strained. It just spiraled out of control. Save it, I spat, holding up a hand to silence him. I don't want to hear any more of your lies. Turning on my heel, I stormed out of the room, my mind reeling from the weight of their deception. As I made my way through the house, I caught sight of Elsie's purse lying on the coffee table. Without thinking, I snatched it up, rummaging through its contents in a desperate search for answers. That's when I saw it, a receipt, crumpled and half hidden beneath a pile of makeup and loose change. My breath caught in my throat as I smoothed out the paper, my eyes scanning the itemized list. There, in black and white, was the damning evidence. A purchase for an expensive watch, one I had never received as a gift. A wave of nausea washed over me as the pieces fell into place. Not only had Evan betrayed me with my own sister, but Elsie had been living a double life as well, taking what she wanted without a shred of remorse. In that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The trust I had placed in those closest to me had been shattered beyond repair. And the only path forward was one of retribution. I would make them pay for what they had done, for the lies and the deception that had torn my world apart. And as I clutched the crumpled receipt in my trembling hand, a sense of grim determination settled over me. This was just the beginning. In the days following my confrontation with Evan and Elsie, I found myself consumed by a burning desire for vengeance. The pain of their betrayal was like a festering wound, one that refused to heal, no matter how much time passed. I spent countless hours poring over Evan's financial records, searching for any irregularities that might provide a clue as to the depth of his deception. It was during one of these late-night sessions that I stumbled upon a series of suspicious transactions, large sums of money being funneled into an offshore account. My mind raced with possibilities, each more unsavory than the last. Was Evan embezzling from the company we had built together? Had he been using our hard-earned profits to fund his indiscretions? Determined to uncover the truth, I turned to more unconventional methods. With trembling fingers, I logged into the tracking app I had surreptitiously installed on Evan's phone months earlier, a precaution I had never imagined needing. The little green dot on the map blinked steadily, leading me to a secluded cabin nestled deep in the woods, a place I had never known existed. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the dot remain stationary for hours, a silent testament to the lies and deceit that had become my life. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening there, behind those cabin walls. The mere thought of Evan and Elsie together, tangled in an embrace born of betrayal, made my stomach churn. In that moment, a plan began to take shape in my mind. A calculated confrontation, one that would leave them with nowhere to hide and no more lies to tell. I sent them each a carefully crafted message, disguising my intentions with false pretenses. To Evan, I promised a chance to discuss our crumbling marriage in a private setting, away from prying eyes. To Elsie, I offered an opportunity to clear the air and mend the fractures in our once unbreakable bond. They both agreed, unaware of the trap I had set, and I found myself counting down the hours until our fateful meeting at the cabin. As the appointed time drew near, I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation. I knew there would be tears, accusations flung like daggers, and perhaps even violence. But none of that mattered. All I craved was the sweet taste of retribution, the chance to make them pay for the suffering they had inflicted upon me. With a steely resolve, I made my way to the cabin, my footsteps crunching on the gravel path that wound through the trees. The door loomed before me, a silent sentinel guarding the secrets that lay within. Taking a deep breath, I reached out and twisted the handle, stepping into the lion's den and bracing myself for the ultimate showdown. The cabin was dimly lit, the flickering flames in the fireplace casting dancing shadows across the walls. Evan and Elsie sat on the worn sofa, their expressions a mix of confusion and trepidation as I entered. "Marla?" Evan's brow furrowed. "What's going on?" I leveled my gaze at them, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Don't play dumb with me. You know exactly why I'm here." Elsie shifted uncomfortably, her eyes downcast. "Marla, please, let's talk about this." "Talk?" I spat, my voice laced with venom. "What's there to talk about? You two have been carrying on behind my back, betraying me in the worst possible way." Evan opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off with a sharp wave of my hand. "Save it. I don't want to hear any more of your lies." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small device, holding it up for them to see. "This is a GPS tracker. I used it to follow you here to this little love nest you've been keeping from me." Elsie paled, her lips parting in a silent gasp. Evan, on the other hand, remained impassive, his jaw set in a tight line. "So you two thought you could just sneak around thinking I was too stupid to figure it out?" I shook my head, a mirthless laugh escaping my lips. "Well, you were wrong. Marla, please let me explain." Elsie began, her voice trembling. "Explain what?" I interrupted, my tone biting. "That you've been sleeping with my husband? That you've been lying to me, your own sister, for God knows how long?" Evan shifted uncomfortably, his gaze flickering between Elsie and me. "It's not as simple as that." "Isn't it?" I challenged, taking a step closer. "Because from where I'm standing, it seems pretty damn simple. You're a lying, cheating bastard, and she's a backstabbing slut who couldn't keep her hands off what wasn't hers." Elsie flinched, as if I had struck her, tears welling in her eyes. "Marla, I never meant to hurt you. I love him." The admission hung in the air like a lead weight, sucking the oxygen from the room. I stared at her, my heart pounding in my ears as the full weight of her betrayal crashed over me. "You love him?" I echoed, my voice dripping with disdain. "How can you sit there and say that to me? He's my husband, Elsie. My husband." "I know, and I'm sorry," she whispered, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "But it's true. I've loved him for years, ever since we were kids. I never meant for it to happen, but the feelings were just too strong." I turned to Evan, my eyes narrowed. "And what about you? Did you love her too, or was she just a convenient way to get your rocks off?" He hesitated, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. "It started out as a fling, but things got complicated. Feelings got involved." "Feelings?" I scoffed. "You're pathetic, both of you." With a sudden burst of fury, I hurled the GPS tracker across the room, watching as it shattered against the stone fireplace. "You want to know how I really feel? I hate you. I hate what you've done to me, to our family. And I swear I'm going to make you pay for every single tear, every sleepless night, every moment of pain you've caused me." Evan and Elsie exchanged a fearful glance, their faces pale as the weight of my words settled over them. "Marla, please!" Elsie begged, her voice a broken whisper. But I had already turned my back on them, my heart hardened with the resolve of a woman scorned. The game was just beginning, and I intended to play it until the bitter end, no matter what the cost. The air was thick with tension as Evan and Elsie stared at me, their faces etched with a mix of fear and remorse. I could see the silent plea in their eyes, begging me to show mercy, to let this ugly chapter fade into the past. But I had no intention of letting them off that easily. "You two have put me through hell," I said, my voice low and steady. "Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" Evan swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. "Marla, whatever you're planning—" "Save it," I cut him off, holding up a hand. "I'm not interested in your excuses or your pleading. You made your choices, and now it's time to face the music." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope, tossing it onto the coffee table between us. "Take a look at those." Evan shot me a wary glance before reaching for the envelope, his fingers trembling slightly as he opened it. Elsie leaned in, her brow furrowing as they rifled through the documents inside. "What is all this?" Evan asked, his voice strained. "That," I said, a hint of satisfaction creeping into my tone, "is the evidence I've gathered against you. Financial discrepancies, embezzlement, misuse of company funds, the list goes on and on." Elsie's eyes widened, and she turned to Evan, her expression a mix of disbelief and horror. "Evan, what did you do?" He shook his head, his jaw clenched tight. "It's not what it looks like. Marla's twisting things, trying to make me look bad." I let out a harsh bark of laughter. "Oh, I don't need to twist anything. The facts speak for themselves. You've been siphoning money from our company, using it to fund your little trysts and indiscretions." Evan's face paled, and for a moment I thought he might try to deny it again. But then his shoulders slumped, and he let out a heavy sigh. "You're right, I got in over my head. Things spiraled out of control." "And you just went along with it?" Elsie's voice was thick with emotion, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "How could you do this to us, to our family?" "I'm sorry," Evan whispered, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "Well, it did happen," I said, my tone hardening. "And now you're going to face the consequences." I reached into my bag once more, pulling out a sleek laptop and setting it on the table. With a few deft keystrokes, I pulled up a series of files and turned the screen towards them. "These are the documents I've prepared for the lawyers," I explained, my voice taking on a businesslike tone. "Divorce papers, asset division, the works. And these." I clicked on another folder, revealing a flurry of emails and financial reports. "These are copies of everything I've sent to the authorities, detailing your misdeeds at the company." Evan's face drained of color, and he slumped back against the couch, his hands covering his face. Elsie, on the other hand, stared at me with a mix of disbelief and something akin to admiration. "You really did your homework," she murmured, shaking her head slowly. I met her gaze, my eyes hard and unyielding. "I told you there would be consequences. This is just the beginning." As I gathered my things, preparing to leave them to absorb the full weight of their actions, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. They had played with fire, and now they were about to get burned, in more ways than one. The game was far from over, but I had just scored a decisive victory. And as I stepped out into the cool night air, a satisfied smile tugged at the corners of my lips. Revenge, it seemed, was a dish best served cold. It was a warm summer evening when our extended family gathered for the annual 4th of July barbecue. The air was filled with the mouth-watering aroma of sizzling burgers and the laughter of children playing in the backyard. As I mingled among the guests, making small talk and accepting congratulations on my recent promotion, I couldn't help but notice the conspicuous absence of Evan and Elsie. A part of me had hoped they would have the decency to stay away, but another part couldn't resist the opportunity to see the looks on their faces when they realized the game had changed. My parents, bless their naive souls, had no idea of the turmoil that had been unfolding behind closed doors. To them, Evan was still the devoted son-in-law, and Elsie was the doting daughter they had raised. That was about to change. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, I cleared my throat and clinked a fork against my glass, calling for everyone's attention. "If I could have everyone's attention, please," I said, my voice ringing out clearly in the sudden hush that fell over the gathering. All eyes turned towards me, a mixture of curiosity and expectation etched on their faces. Little did they know I was about to drop a bombshell that would rock their worlds. "First of all, I want to thank you all for coming," I began, offering them a warm smile that belied the steel in my gaze. "It means so much to have the support of our family and friends during this difficult time." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and I could see the puzzled frowns on my parents' faces. They had no idea what was coming. "As some of you may have noticed, Evan and Elsie aren't here tonight," I continued, my tone purposefully casual. "And there's a good reason for that." I paused for dramatic effect, letting the anticipation build until it was almost palpable. "You see, I recently discovered that my dear husband and my beloved sister have been carrying on an affair behind my back." The words tumbled out, sharp and accusatory, and I savored the collective gasp that swept through the crowd. "Marla, what are you saying?" My mother's voice wavered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's true, Mom," I said, turning to face her. "Evan and Elsie have been sleeping together, betraying our family in the most despicable way imaginable." Silence descended, heavy and suffocating, as the weight of my revelation sank in. I could see the shock and disgust painted across their faces, the disbelief giving way to righteous anger. And then, as if on cue, the back gate swung open, and Evan and Elsie stepped into the yard, their expressions frozen in horror as they realized the truth had been laid bare. "Marla, what's going on?" Evan asked, his voice tight with barely contained panic. I turned to face them, my eyes narrowed and my chin raised in defiance. "I'm just letting our family and friends know about your little indiscretion," I said, my tone dripping with disdain. "They deserve to know the truth about the lying, cheating snakes they've been associating with." Elsie's face crumpled and she buried her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Evan, on the other hand, stood rooted to the spot, his jaw clenched and his eyes blazing with fury. "How dare you?" he growled, taking a step towards me. "You had no right to do this." "No right," I echoed, letting out a bitter laugh. "You two were the ones who betrayed me, who stomped on our vows and our family. I have every right to expose you for the despicable human beings you are." The crowd had grown deathly silent, watching the confrontation unfold with a mix of shock and morbid fascination. I could feel the weight of their judgment bearing down on Evan and Elsie, their once respected reputations crumbling to dust. As I stood there, basking in the aftermath of my vengeance, a sense of vindication washed over me. They had brought this upon themselves, and now they would have to face the consequences of their actions, in front of everyone they knew and loved. The game was far from over, but this was a victory I intended to savor. Months had passed since that fateful night when I exposed Evan and Elsie's betrayal to our family and friends. The fallout had been swift and brutal. Evan's company faced a barrage of legal troubles and financial ruin, while Elsie found herself ostracized from our once tight-knit circle. As for me, I had embarked on a journey of healing and self-discovery. The pain of their deception still lingered, a dull ache that ebbed and flowed, but I was slowly learning to let go of the anger and bitterness that had consumed me for so long. It was a crisp autumn morning when I heard a tentative knock at my door. Frowning, I made my way to the entryway, peering through the peephole to see who my unexpected visitor was. Elsie stood on my doorstep, her shoulders hunched and her eyes downcast. She looked tired, worn down by the weight of her mistakes and the consequences that had followed. For a moment, I considered not answering, letting her stew in her own misery. But something, curiosity perhaps, or a lingering sense of sisterly loyalty, compelled me to unlatch the door. "Elsie," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. She flinched at the sound of my voice, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. "Marla," she began, her voice trembling. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now, but I had to try." I raised an eyebrow, crossing my arms over my chest. "Try what exactly?" "To apologize." The words tumbled out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for far too long. What I did to you, to our family, it was unforgivable. I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way, and I'll never be able to make up for that. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for a fleeting moment I felt a pang of sympathy. But it was quickly overshadowed by the memories of her deception, of the lies and the hurt she had inflicted. You're right, I said, my tone firm. It is unforgivable. Elsie's shoulders slumped, and she nodded slowly, as if she had expected nothing less. I know, she whispered, but I had to try. I had to let you know how sorry I am, how much I regret everything that happened. Sorry? I echoed, letting out a bitter laugh. Sorry doesn't even begin to cover it, Elsie. You slept with my husband, the man I trusted and loved more than anyone in this world. You shattered our family, our bonds of sisterhood, all because you couldn't keep your hands to yourself. She flinched, as if I had struck her, but I pressed on, the words pouring out in a torrent of pent-up emotion. Do you have any idea what that felt like? I demanded, my voice rising. The pain, the humiliation, the utter devastation of realizing that the two people I loved most had been lying to me, betraying me in the worst possible way? Elsie opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off with a sharp wave of my hand. Save it, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. I don't want to hear your excuses or your apologies. What's done is done, and as far as I'm concerned, our relationship is over. Her face crumpled, and she nodded, blinking back tears. I understand, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I had to try. With one last lingering look, she turned and walked away. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched her retreating form, a strange mix of emotions swirling within me, anger, sadness, and perhaps even a glimmer of pity. But as I closed the door and turned back to my life, I knew that no matter what happened, I would never allow myself to be victimized again. The wounds may have healed, but the scars would remain, a constant reminder of the betrayal I had endured and the strength I had found in its aftermath. From the ashes of my broken heart, I had risen like a phoenix, forged anew by the fires of revenge and self-discovery. And as I looked ahead to the future, I knew that no matter what challenges lay before me, I would face them head-on, stronger and wiser than ever before. I sat at my computer skimming through emails as I did every evening after work. Most were routine, bills, newsletters, the occasional spam. But one email caught my eye, sent to my husband Devin's account from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "Our usual spot tonight?" My heart raced as I clicked open the message. The body was blank, but the implications were clear. Devin was meeting someone secretly, and I had stumbled upon evidence of his betrayal. I tried to rationalize it, grasping at any semblance of an innocent explanation. But the more I dwelled on Devin's recent behavior, the late nights, the hushed phone calls, the more everything started to make sense in a sickening way. That night, I feigned normalcy as Devin came home well past midnight, offering his usual vague excuses about work and client meetings. I smiled and nodded, burying my rage as I committed to uncovering the truth. In the following days, I traced Devin's movements like a seasoned investigator. I tailed him from a distance, watching as he met a striking young woman for clandestine rendezvous at cafes and parks. The way they interacted left no doubt. This was far more than a professional relationship. My mind raced with questions. Who was she? How long had this been going on? And why? After nearly 15 years of marriage, I thought Devin and I were solid. Clearly, I had been living a lie. Determined to gather undeniable proof, I utilized skills from my former career as a legal document analyst. I pored over our financial records, uncovering suspicious cash withdrawals and purchases I couldn't account for. The final stroke came when I installed hidden cameras and trackers in Devin's car and office. The footage left me shattered. There he was, my husband of 15 years, in passionate embraces with a woman young enough to be his daughter. As the days ticked by, an icy resolve took hold. I would no longer be the scorned wife who turned a blind eye. If Devin wanted to betray our vows and humiliate me, I would repay that betrayal tenfold. I began meticulously planning my attack, blocking out a weekend when I knew Devin's mistress would likely visit our home. Everything had to be perfect. The staged demeanor, the seemingly innocuous get-together I would insist on hosting. And when the time finally came, I would unleash the truth, ensuring Devon's indiscretions played out before an audience of not just his accomplished colleagues, but our entire social circle. Let the games begin. In the days that followed, I became a silent observer in my own life, studying Devon's every move with the scrutiny of a private investigator. Each morning, I would watch him leave for work, tracking the times he arrived and departed his office building. On several occasions, I tailed him from a distance as he made unnecessary detours, always to the same upscale plaza near the financial district. Working late again, he would claim whenever I confronted him about his delayed returns home. The lies dripped from his mouth with unsettling ease. If I hadn't seen the proof with my own eyes, I might have believed him. But I knew better now. During those secretive outings, I witnessed Devon slipping into classy bistros and dimly lit bars, always meeting the same slender, raven-haired beauty, his mistress. Her name was Sienna, I had discovered, an ambitious young professional at the same firm where my husband worked. Just how long had this torrid affair been unfolding? Months? Years? The thought made me ill. Some nights, parked across the street, I would watch them through the windows of Sienna's apartment as they cozied up on the couch, laughing and canoodling like love-struck teens. The sight of my husband's arms around another woman's waist, his lips pressed against hers, ignited a searing pain I could scarcely contain. Other times, Devon's meetings with his lover appeared more utilitarian, conducted in hushed conversations at out-of-the-way cafes. Business dealings, perhaps? I could only speculate. But the secrecy surrounding their interactions hinted at something deeply untoward. Throughout it all, I remained an invisible specter, documenting every sordid detail for the day of reckoning I knew was coming. I compiled meticulous records of dates, times, locations, anything that could be leveraged as evidence against the two snakes betraying me. "Hey, sorry I'm late," Devon would say upon returning home at night, his phone perpetually glued to his ear. "Client call ran long. You know how it is." My heart pounded each time he spouted those trite excuses. How I yearned to hurl his own deceit back in his smug face. "Of course, dear," I would reply, my voice sickly sweet with feigned understanding. "I know your career comes first." If only he knew how painfully aware I was of where his priorities truly lay, and with whom. As the days ticked by, I could feel the storm clouds gathering, fortifying my resolve. This facade couldn't endure forever. Eventually, the truth would detonate like a powder keg, decimating the life Devon and I had built. And when that day of destruction arrived, I fully intended to be the one who lit the fuse. With each passing day, the depth of Devon's betrayal became more apparent. As I scoured our financial records, glaring inconsistencies jumped out at me. Cash withdrawals that couldn't be explained, lavish expenditures on upscale restaurants and hotels. My husband was spending money like it was going out of style. Our money. "What's this charge for the Ritz-Carlton?" I asked one evening, feigning innocence as I waved a bank statement in Devon's direction. "I don't recall us staying there recently." Devon barely looked up from his phone, his thumb dancing across the screen. "Clients," he muttered distractedly. "Took a couple guys from Berlin out for the weekend. Big potential deal." I felt my blood pressure spike at his casual dismissal. Liar. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to unleash the full fury I'd been bottling up, to hurl every shred of evidence into his smug face. But I bit my tongue, recognizing that patience would be my greatest weapon. "I see," I replied tightly, masking my contempt with a thin smile. "Well, I certainly hope it was worth the expense." In the ensuing days, I continued slipping away at odd hours to stake out the series of coffee shops and posh eateries where Devon conducted his not-so-clandestine trysts. I observed him greeting Sienna with an uncomfortable familiarity, like a pair of longtime lovers rather than the co-workers they claimed to be. Their interactions dripped with intimacy. His arm casually draped around her shoulders, her fingers idly tracing patterns on his inner thigh beneath the table's cover. It made me want to vomit. While tailing them proved fruitless for recording salacious footage, it offered a steady drip feed of damning circumstantial evidence. Phone records confirmed the frequency of their communications. Dozens of calls and texts each day, most clustering during workday hours when Devon claimed to be busy on the job. Once, while lurking in a shadowed alcove near their favored bistro, I managed to capture an audio recording of their hushed conversation. "We can't keep doing this," Sienna was whispering furtively. "If Marcella finds out—" "She won't." Devon cut her off dismissively. "She's blissfully ignorant, hasn't suspected a thing." The arrogance in his tone made my skin crawl. Their words dissolved into tense murmuring after that, but the message was clear. Devon viewed me as a hapless, clueless fool, blind to the lengths of his deception. How terribly wrong he was. In that moment, something inside me hardened like stone. Any fleeting twinges of guilt or self-doubt evaporated, replaced by an icy determination to obliterate the fairy tale Devon had constructed. That night, every ounce of self-restraint was required to maintain my facade of nonchalance as we readied for bed. I watched him methodically brushing his teeth, smiling that plastic smile he reserved for when we were getting along. All the while, I fought back waves of revulsion at how easily he was able to feign domesticity. "Night, babe," he murmured as he slipped between the sheets, arm draped casually over my midsection, a grotesque mockery of intimacy. I tensed like a statue beneath his grazing touch, channeling every fiber of self-control to suppress my body's instinct to recoil. "Good night," I replied, my tone empty and devoid of feeling. As I laid awake in the darkness, harrowing thoughts swirled through my mind of what Devon's grand awakening would look like. I yearned to ensure the moment would be as devastating as the depth of his lies. For now, the game carried on. But he would soon discover that there were two masterful actors in this tragedy, and I was merely biding my time until the curtain rose. With each piece of evidence mounting against Devon, my determination to expose his lies intensified. I knew confronting him directly would be futile. He was too skilled a liar, too practiced at deflecting and denying. No, I needed irrefutable proof, the kind that would render him utterly defenseless when I finally unleashed the full force of his betrayal. It was time to take my investigation to the next level. Using contacts from my former career, I was able to acquire sophisticated surveillance equipment, miniature cameras designed to be concealed in household objects, GPS trackers small enough to affix to a vehicle's undercarriage. If Devon thought he could carry on his affair undetected, he was sorely mistaken. I spent hours meticulously planting the micro-cameras throughout our home, inside lamps, bookshelves, even the vent grating in our bedroom. Anywhere Devon and his mistress might let their guards down when they falsely believed themselves unwatched. With a few taps on my laptop, I could access a live feed to monitor their every move. The trackers proved even easier to implement. One morning before Devon departed for work, I slipped outside and quickly secured one to the underside of his car, activating it with a portable receiver that would alert me whenever the vehicle was in motion. From that point on, my husband's movements were an open book to me. It didn't take long for the surveillance to pay dividends. Within days, I began compiling video evidence of Devon's indiscretions, footage of him stealing passionate embraces with Sienna on our living room couch, obliviously making use of the home I had made for us. Their touchy displays of affection made me recoil in disgust and horror. In one particularly nauseating clip, I watched Devon and his lover half undressed and intertwined beneath my marital bedsheets, their nude bodies slithering together like slimy eels. I felt utterly defiled by the sight, like an unwitting voyeur to the most sordid variety of pornography. Combined with the GPS data mapping Devon's travels to all the same bars, restaurants, and hotels where I'd witnessed their trysts, the personal nature of this betrayal crystallized like a white-hot iron driving into my gut. This wasn't merely about money or lust or ego, as so many affairs often boil down to. This was a harsh truth, a reality where my husband had chosen to demolish the very sanctity of our marriage vows and defile the home I thought we had built together. Any remnants of the person I thought Devon was, the man I trusted and loved, eroded away with each new layer of deception peeled back. In his place remained a remorseless, selfish snake who seemed to derive twisted gratification from his duplicity. Every night after he returned home, feigning the role of dutiful husband and acting as though nothing were amiss, my grip on reality slipped a little more. Did he really view me as that pathetic, some empty-headed fool who could be deceived so effortlessly? The insult burned me from the inside out, becoming all I could dwell on. As enraging as the evidence seemed, however, it also filled me with a sense of wicked empowerment. The more I unearthed, the sharper the knives became for eviscerating Devon when the moment finally came to detonate this truth bomb and expel him from my life. His world was about to come crashing down, eaten by shattering Teton, and I would be the one swinging the demolition ball. For all his shameless audacity in orchestrating this double life, Devon remained blissfully ignorant of just how exposed he truly was. The arena was being prepared for his greatest humiliation, the grand unraveling masterfully choreographed. And I was going to savor every last excruciating second when the curtain finally rose. With each damning video file and financial record amassed, the path ahead crystallized before me. Devon's grand deception could no longer be allowed to fester in the shadows. It was time to force this sordid truth into the blazing light of day. I began plotting the perfect occasion to stage his downfall. A scenario crafted to meticulously undermine his every defense while maximizing his public shame and humiliation. Every detail had to be accounted for, from the players involved down to the sequence of events. Like a master choreographer, I would orchestrate a spectacle of cataclysmic proportions. After weeks of surveillance, I identified a prime opportunity, an upcoming weekend when Devon's usual haunts and travel mapped out in a predictable pattern. Sienna would undoubtedly find her way to our home for another depraved rendezvous, utterly oblivious that I had become painfully aware of their indiscretions. A bitter smirk crossed my lips as I began making preparations. I would be out of town that weekend on a supposed work obligation, or so the two snakes would believe, based on the trail of breadcrumbs I carefully laid. Little did they know their dirty little secret was about to be blown wide open. With surgical precision, I issued a series of invitations to close friends and select colleagues from Devon's firm, contriving a flimsy excuse about hosting a celebration for his recent promotion. The duplicity oozed from my lips as I peddled the ruse, but my moral convictions had been thoroughly eroded by this prolonged torment. "It would mean so much to have you both there," I insisted to one couple in a carefully practiced tone of warmth and hospitality. "Devon has worked so hard for this. I want to make it a night he'll never forget." By the time the fateful weekend arrived, the stage was immaculately set. I had strategically positioned cameras to capture footage from every vantage point in our home, ensuring not a single lurid detail would go unwitnessed. The guest list had been culled down to an intimate party, a trusted inner circle whose lives would be as upended as my own by the night's events. I also made sure to tip off one final attendee, someone from Devon's office that I knew would relish seeing his world crumble, an ambitious up-and-comer who resented playing second fiddle to his success. Corporate politics could be so deliciously vindictive when leveraged correctly. As our supposed celebration got underway, I played the role of gracious hostess with clinical detachment, masking my inner fury while feeding Devon's ego with hollow praise for his accomplishments. His chest puffed out like a pompous whistling bird, basking in the admiration while his young mistress looked on adoringly. "To Devon," I proclaimed with a raised glass, flashing him a wicked grin. "The man who has earned every single accolade through his tireless work ethic and unwavering integrity." Devon beamed like a delighted child, lips curling up in a smug smile as he accepted the toast. The arrogance was palpable, the self-assured bravado of a man who believed his carefully constructed facade could never be penetrated. Oh, how misguided his confidence would prove to be. Sienna sat a few seats away, hands folded demurely in her lap, as she watched the proceedings with the placid countenance of someone who thought they'd skillfully concealed their sins. Little did she realize her role as Devon's downfall accomplice was about to take center stage. As the night peaked with the cutting of an ostentatious celebratory cake, a gaudy spectacle meant to inflate Devon's ego one final time, I caught the vixen's gaze lingering on him with undisguised hunger. A shudder of revulsion ripped through me, cementing my resolve. Let the games begin. The faux celebration was in full swing by the time Devon and Sienna slipped away under the guise of freshening up. I watched them disappear down the hallway on the live video feed, my heart thudding with a mixture of dread and dark anticipation. This was it. The moment of truth I had been meticulously engineering for weeks. They didn't even attempt discretion as they entered the bedroom, peeling off their clothes in heated frenzy like a pair of libidinous teenagers. Sienna yanked Devon onto the disheveled sheets, her lips hungrily devouring his as they tangled together in a sweaty knot of illicit passion. My stomach turned as I witnessed the lurid display, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. This unseemly tryst was no longer some theoretical horror. It was viscerally, undeniably real, unfolding right before me in high definition. Gritting my teeth, I tapped the button to remotely kill the audio on the hidden cameras. As perversely gratifying as it would be to expose every sordid detail, I refused to subject our friends to that level of debasement. But the visuals alone would paint a devastating portrait. As the despicable sounds of their frenzied lovemaking reverberated through our marital bedroom, I stalked back down the hallway toward my unsuspecting audience with a large TV remote clutched in my white-knuckled grip. Their chattering voices fell silent as I entered, every head swiveling in my direction with curious stares. My face was flushed, radiating with a quiet fury that seemed to permeate the air like an ominous thunderhead. For a suspended moment, no one dared shatter the tension. Then a throat cleared. "Everything okay, honey?" Devon's business partner Marcus ventured carefully. "You look upset." An eerie calm washed over me as I leveled him with an icy glare. "Not at all," I replied, the syrupy sweetness in my tone belying the venom that was about to spew forth. "In fact, I think it's time for Devon to receive his special gift." With a deft flick of my thumb, I switched on the wall-mounted flat screen behind me, and chaos erupted. There they were, larger than life in high-resolution video, my husband and his vapid mistress fornicating shamelessly in the sacred space we once shared as man and wife. Clothes strewn haphazardly on the floor, Sienna's tanned limbs coiled around Devon's pale, glistening flesh as they clawed at each other like depraved animals in a mating frenzy. The horror and shock rippled through the room in waves as our guests recoiled, averting their eyes from the graphic display while choking out exclamations of disgust and dismay. Marcus slapped his palms over his young daughter's eyes, shielding their innocence from the sudden obscenity bombarding them. But not me. My gaze remained transfixed on the screen with a twisted sort of fascination, drinking in every anguished reaction as Devon's charade was immolated before their disbelieving eyes. Then he stumbled into view. Devon himself, hair tousled and face flushed with the heat of coition, eyes finally registering the depraved horror unfolding on that unforgiving screen. His jaw went slack as realization washed over him in crashing waves of shock and doom. Our eyes met through the camera's unblinking lens, his wide and mortified, mine glittering with the cold satisfaction of the disillusioned. In that moment, I could have sworn I glimpsed the flicker of fear igniting behind Devon's arrogant stare. Here it was, stripped bare. The reckoning I had so patiently orchestrated, come to deliver his ultimate humiliation and disgrace. "You," he choked out, voice quavering with a naked terror that thrilled me to my core. "Game over," I replied, permitting the barest hint of a smirk to grace my lips. "I believe this performance has reached its shattering climax." It took every ounce of will to suppress the manic laughter bubbling up from the darkest recesses of my soul. Revenge, as they say, is a dish best served with enthusiastic relish, and I had choreographed the perfect menu. The explosion of shock and outrage that engulfed the room was cataclysmic. Devon and Sienna scrambled to cover their nudity as the lurid video continued to play out, but their desperate modesty came too little, too late. The damage was irreversibly done. "My God, Devon, what have you done?" Marcus spat out, face contorted with revulsion as he shielded his young daughter's eyes. You're despicable!" The condemnations began raining down from every direction, a torrential outpouring of disgust and betrayal from those closest to us. Our supposed friends, the pillars of our community, whose respect and admiration my husband had so zealously coveted. Yet not a shred of remorse flickered across Devon's features as he stared back at them, boldly defiant even in the midst of his shocking exposure. The arrogance was staggering, solidifying my conviction that he alone was the architect of his own ruination. "Oh, don't act so bloody shocked," he sneered at the assemblage, gesturing dismissively. "Like none of you lot have ever stepped out before. You're just jealous I had the balls to go after what I wanted." An icy chill gripped the room as the weight of his callous words sank in. Was this entitled scumbag actually attempting to justify his adulterous indiscretion? My hands balled into white-knuckled fists, every muscle tensing with the Herculean effort of restraining myself from lunging across the room. But I would not be the one to shatter the delicious composure that night. No, that disintegration would stem from the very community he had betrayed. "You egomaniacal pig!" Keith, a former golf buddy of Devon's, barked out in a tone dripping with condemnation. "To think I welcomed you into my home around my wife and children. Did you have no sense of decency whatsoever?" The denunciations snowballed from there, each one more vicious than the last as the room's occupants seemed to feed off each other's collective disgust. Sienna cowered away from the verbal onslaught like a scorned dog, openly weeping at the ruin she had enabled. "You make me sick. Unfaithful swine. That poor woman." Through it all, my features remained an inscrutable mask of grim satisfaction. Let them vent their horror and expel every last shred of respect they once harbored. This rightful vilification was long overdue. When the barrage showed no signs of relenting, Devon made the fatal mistake of rounding his scornful glare upon me, those once charming eyes now burning with defiant hatred. The expression alone was like a lurid taunt, daring me to join the chorus of rebuke. "What, no token protest from the loyal wife?" he sneered, upper lip curling in derision. "Don't have the nerve to admit what a gullible fool I've made of you all these years." I felt the heat prickling in my cheeks, but refused to be baited down to his level of vulgarity. Not after so much painstaking preparation had been invested in securing this moment. Instead, I simply arched one daring eyebrow and replied, "I believe these people's actions have rendered any commentary from me quite unnecessary." The words dripped with undisguised menace, eliciting a few disconcerted looks from our guests. Good, let the full extent of my cold resolution unsettle them, too. They were all bearing witness to the incineration of the chummy veneers we'd all been clinging to. The next volley would be even more searing. "Besides," I continued, turning towards the most prominent members of Devon's financial sphere with a wicked smile, "I'm sure your colleagues will be most intrigued to learn about the company resources you've been diverting towards your indiscretions." Several jaws dropped at the bald implication, including Mr. Walsh, a senior executive whose wife had enthusiastically attended multiple fundraisers I'd organized over the years. As the shockwaves began reverberating through that fraction of spectators, I permitted myself a satisfied smirk. This grand unraveling was only just beginning to detonate. The aftermath of that cataclysmic evening reverberated through every aspect of our lives like a neutron bomb detonation. In the searing fallout of Devon's exposed infidelity, nothing was left unscathed. Our marriage, our reputations, even his once prestigious career. As the incriminating evidence continued spilling out over the following weeks, the corporate titans who once lauded my husband as a rising star swiftly distanced themselves. Investigations were launched into his financial improprieties and misuse of company resources. Allegations of insider trading and embezzlement began swirling like a dark miasma. I had no idea the depth of Devon's deceit, his boss, Walter Green, professed in an interview, attempting to preserve his own image amid the burgeoning scandal. To say I'm appalled would be an understatement. He has deeply betrayed this firm's trust. Within a matter of days, Devon found himself unceremoniously ousted, resigning in utter disgrace as the sordid revelations mounted. The hefty severance and patched-together explanation he had once anticipated now lay in ashes. As for Sienna, the home-wrecking harlot at the center of this derailment, her ambitious trajectory imploded in spectacular fashion. She became a pariah among her colleagues, those who once curried her favor now recoiling in open disdain. I mean, who does that? I overheard one of her former office friends sneering during a partial run-in at the grocery store. Sleeping with a married man twice her age? She's utterly depraved. Their contemptuous whispers trailed off as they brushed past me, faces averted to avoid acknowledging the unfortunate woman whose marital world they had helped incinerate. I couldn't even summon the energy to feel gratified by their scorn. So much damage, so much humiliation and pain. Was this venomous inferno truly what I'd been coveting all along? In my darkest moments, I felt almost ashamed at having craved such catastrophic destruction. But then my mind would inevitably drift back to those agonizing weeks of holding vigil over Devon's indiscretions, enduring the casual ease with which he defiled our marriage vows. The anguish of discovering he valued my love so little, viewed me as nothing more than a hapless, disposable pawn in service of his own selfish whims. That was the violation I could never unsee or begin to forgive. As the legal proceedings for our divorce trudged onward with agonizing inevitability, I found myself eagerly discarding everything tainted by Devon's ruinous deceit, the family home, all his accumulated possessions, even childhood mementos that had once held sentimental meaning. Like prying off layers of spiritual scar tissue, I systematically purged any remnants of the life we had constructed, brick by immolating brick. It was freeing in a way, liberating to envision building myself anew without that dead weight of betrayal shackled to my soul. The final cosmic justice arrived in the belated implosion of Devon's finances. The legal fees, forfeited assets, and punitive damages levied by his former firm drained his resources with brutal efficiency. The ostentatious trappings of his material success, the McMansion, the imported sports cars, that obnoxious racing yacht, all liquidated to shifts of assets and garish auction blocks. Within a year's span, the man who had once arrogantly lording his affluence was effectively destitute, his reputation ruined, his finances gutted, his family shattered into irreparable shards. Whereas I had steadily begun reconstructing the shattered fragments of my own identity into something new. As the dust finally settled, our paths crossed one final time upon leaving court after the divorce decree was issued. Disheveled and haunted, Devon looked every bit the faded parody of his formerly smug, self-assured self. I almost pitied him until he opened his mouth. "Happy now?" he spat out through clenched teeth, venom dripping from his words. "You've won. You took everything that made my life worth living." I stared back at this broken husk of the man I once adored, feeling only a hollow emptiness. He was right. In pursuing this righteous vengeance, I had surrendered the past in its totality. The beautiful memories lay charred alongside the betrayal, the bitterness of our downfall tainting any remnant of what we'd once cherished. But I would not apologize for that loss, not after he had forced my hand so unforgivably. No, what I mourned most was the person Devon had once been, and who I thought I was marrying. The man of integrity and honor I had fought so hard for was clearly an illusion all along, and I was simply too blind to perceive the rot spreading from within. So as I turned to walk away into my hard-won future, one fundamental truth propelled me forward. That chapter was over, never to be revisited. When this person cusses you, he is wrong. He only says this to try to hurt you. I was free to author the next one from the indelible lessons of this sordid saga. And this time that story would belong to me alone. I took a deep breath, forcing a smile as Elise walked into the backyard for our family barbecue. Edwin squeezed my hand, sensing my unease. "It'll be fine," he whispered, though his eyes betrayed doubt. Elise plopped down on a lawn chair, not even glancing our way. The tension was palpable, like a thick fog smothering any warmth between us. I had tried so hard to connect with her, but she remained distant, her resentment towards me as impenetrable as a fortress wall. "Elise, why don't you help your father with the grill?" I suggested, hoping some father-daughter bonding might thaw the ice. She rolled her eyes, but begrudgingly stood up, grabbing a baseball bat lying nearby. As she swung it casually, I felt a pang of unease. Edwin chuckled nervously. "Be careful with that, honey." In a split second, the bat slipped from her hands, hurtling straight towards me. I froze, my heart pounding, as it whistled past, missing me by inches. Edwin rushed over, his face pale. "Elise, what were you thinking?" "It was an accident," she shrugged, not even apologizing. But as I met her cold, defiant stare, I knew better. This was no accident. It was a warning shot, a clear message that she wanted nothing to do with my efforts at family unity. The line had been drawn, and the battle lines were forming for a war I never wanted to fight. A few weeks after the barbecue incident, Edwin came home looking grim. "I lost the Henderson account," he said, sinking into a chair. My heart sank. The Henderson tech firm was one of his biggest clients. "How bad is it?" I asked cautiously. Edwin sighed heavily. "Pretty bad. Without their retainer, we're going to be seriously strapped for cash." He ran a hand through his graying hair. "I don't know how we'll afford Elise's college next year." Speaking of the devil, Elise walked in right then. "What about my college?" she demanded. "Finances are tight," Edwin explained warily. "We may have to look at cheaper options." Elise's eyes narrowed to slits. "You're not sending me to a crappy state school after all my hard work." "Don't take that tone with your father," I chided, unable to stay silent. "Big mistake." She whirled on me, venom dripping from her words. "You're not my mother, so stay out of this." I recoiled, stung. Edwin shot me an apologetic look but didn't reprimand her outburst. As usual, the fragile truce held by walking on eggshells around Elise. Later that night, I approached Edwin tentatively. "Look, I know money's tight, but let me help cover Elise's tuition." He shook his head adamantly. "You've been generous enough. I can't let you pay for my daughter's education." "Edwin, we're partners," I insisted. "Your struggles are mine. Please, let me do this, for our family." He searched my eyes for a long moment before giving a reluctant nod. "Okay, thank you, Marta." I smiled, hoping this olive branch might finally earn me some goodwill from Elise. Fat chance. The next day, she leveled me with a contemptuous glare when I told her the news about paying her tuition. "I don't want your charity," she spat. I fought to keep my temper. "It's not charity, Elise. We're family now, whether you like it or not." A cruel smirk twisted her lips. "You think throwing money around makes you part of this family? You'll never be anything more than Dad's little sugar baby." White-hot rage lanced through me at her vile insinuation. Taking a deep breath, I spoke slowly through gritted teeth. "You'd better watch yourself, young lady." Elise simply laughed derisively and stormed off, leaving me shaking with barely contained fury. Her escalating vitriol showed she had absolutely no intention of letting me into her life. If anything, she seemed bent on tearing our family apart seam by seam. Well, two could play at that game. I was done being the punching bag. If she insisted on making an enemy of me, I would meet her attacks with equal force. That spoiled little brat had no idea what she was in for. A few weeks later, Edwin and I hosted a small dinner party to celebrate his firm landing a promising new client. I was determined to bury the hatchet with Elise, at least for one night. As we sipped wine before the meal, Elise fixed me with her trademark sneer. "So, Marta, Dad tells me you used to run your own business before hitting it big in real estate." I tensed, thrown by the seeming non sequitur. "Well, yes, I had a small marketing company years ago." "That must have been quite the experience." Her eyes glinted with undisguised malice. "Considering it went bankrupt amidst rumors of shady practices." The room fell deathly silent, as the other guests froze. My cheeks burned with humiliation and shame over her dredging up that painful history. Edwin quickly tried to change the subject, but Elise plowed onwards mercilessly. "They said you consistently misled clients, over-promising results you couldn't deliver. Shady stuff." Tears of anguish pricked my eyes as old wounds ripped open. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. "Leave it alone, Elise," Edwin said in a carefully measured tone, shooting her a warning look. But she ignored him, keeping her cruel gaze locked on my stricken face. "I'm just curious, what drove you to be such a unethical businesswoman back then? Did the ends always justify the means for you?" That did it. The floodgates burst open as years of pent-up hurt came pouring out. "You smug, sanctimonious little brat," I exploded, shocking everyone with my outburst. "You have no idea what you're talking about." Elise recoiled, her sneer faltering for the first time. But I was on a roll, unleashing a torrent of raw emotion. Maybe my business failed, but at least I took risks and worked for everything I have. What have you ever done besides being a spiteful, ungrateful leech on your father? Her face contorted with fury as she opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "Save your vicious lies. I'm done walking on eggshells around your childish tantrums." I whirled towards the gaping guests. "I'm so sorry, but I've lost my appetite." Grabbing my purse, I stormed out, leaving chaos in my wake. As I broke down in heaving sobs in the privacy of my car, one gut-wrenching truth became excruciatingly clear. Any hope of Elise and I achieving a real family bond was dead. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. If she wanted a war, she had just gotten one. I would match her blow for blow until she learned her place. The gloves were officially off. After the disastrous dinner party, the atmosphere at home was more toxic than ever. Edwin kept trying to play peacemaker, but Elise and I were done pulling punches. You're going to have to choose sides eventually, Dad, she sneered one night over a frosty, silent meal. Whose life is more important, mine or your little wife's? Edwin looked pained, but remained infuriatingly neutral. Don't make me pick between my family, Elise. Can't we all just get along? Elise laughed derisively. Yeah, like that's possible with her around poisoning everything. I bit back the urge to slap that sneer off her smug face. Instead, I decided to take the gloves off in a different way, by hitting her where it would hurt most. Over the next few weeks, I discreetly started digging into Elise's life outside our home. What I uncovered sickened yet unsurprised me. Falsified transcripts, incidents of cheating and plagiarism, fake letters attesting to charitable work she'd never done. This perfect daughter was a fraud, plain and simple. No wonder she hated my presence. I represented a threat to her precious facade of virtue. Armed with my damning new intel, I calmly confronted her one afternoon. Your grades and extracurriculars seem embellished. She stiffened, those cold eyes burning into me. You're delusional. Everything's legitimate. I have proof that says otherwise. I ticked off each infraction evenly. Cheating, plagiarism, forgery. Should I go on? For a split second, I saw a flicker of fear cross her face before the scornful mask slipped back on. You're bluffing. You don't have anything. Don't I? I pulled out a thick file detailing every lie, every deception. Want to tell your father the truth about his perfect princess? Elise's knuckles whitened as she clenched her fists, eyes blazing pure hatred. You're going to regret this, she hissed. Am I? I shrugged nonchalantly. Your move? The next day, she made her next move all right, but it backfired spectacularly. While I was in the backyard, a heavy flower pot came crashing down from the second story just feet away from me. Edwin came running, panic etched across his face. What happened? Ask your darling Elise, I spat, shaken from the near miss but keeping my cool. She just tried to crush my skull. Elise stormed outside, face flushed with rage. You're lying. It was an accident. I crossed my arms, unmoved. Save your lies. We both know you wanted me seriously hurt. Father and daughter faced off in stony silence before Elise finally caved under our scrutiny. So what if I did? She snarled, voice dripping venom. You're a psycho who deserves worse. My heart broke seeing the look of devastated betrayal on Edwin's face. This was his baby girl talking. What had caused her to evolve into such a twisted, vindictive shell? For the first time since entering this nightmare, a tiny flicker of pity sparked within me for Elise. Whatever hurts lay beneath, whatever demons drove her, they ran deeper than I could fathom. But that small pity was quickly extinguished as I realized with chilling certainty that there was no reaching her, no voice of reason that could penetrate her toxic darkness. Our war had finally entered the realm of life and death, and in that merciless realm, I vowed to be the last one standing, no matter how destructive the fallout. I was done being a victim to Elise's depravity. In the days following Elise's flower pot attack, the war between us escalated to dizzying heights. I started compiling an airtight dossier of every despicable act, every lie she'd ever committed, forged letters of recommendation, plagiarized essays, caught cheating on exams. Not one instance of academic misconduct was left out as I methodically built an undeniable case against her. Elise remained frighteningly brazen, shooting me contemptuous looks, but staying uncharacteristically silent. For now. Edwin, meanwhile, was a hollow shell of himself, the life gradually beaten out by the trauma of seeing his once angelic daughter's true nature unveiled. I ached for him, but my pity was overshadowed by pragmatic resolve. I had to protect what was mine, my husband, my home, my life, that she was so hell-bent on destroying. If that meant ruthlessly dismantling her veneer of lies, so be it. One evening, Elise finally emerged from her sullen silence over a tense dinner. I saw the real estate analyst you hired poking around, she said with a cruel smirk. Digging up more dirt on me? I gave a serene smile. Just covering all my bases. You're wasting your time. She stabbed a fork into her plate. Dad would never believe your lies over his own flesh and blood. We'll see about that. I replied coolly. The truth has a way of coming out. Her nostrils flared, but I remained unruffled, taking a pointed sip of wine. Let her fume all she wanted. It would be the last of her blustering bravado. Because later that night, the final stroke was put into motion. While Elise was out with friends, I neatly compiled all the damning evidence and sensitive personal documents into an envelope for Edwin. No more soft peddling, no more appeasing the demon child. It was time he saw with crystalline clarity the despicable lies his daughter had perpetuated. When she finally stomped home well past curfew, I was waiting in the living room, envelope in hand. "You're out pretty late," I remarked mildly. "Fun night?" Elise sneered. "Don't pretend you care about my life." On the contrary. I held up the plump envelope, watching her face pale. "I care very much about the truth coming to light." She opened her mouth, but no words came out as stark realization dawned. "Your father's waiting to finally see the real you," I said softly, letting the implication hang in the air. For once, she seemed at a complete loss. No retort, no bravado to deflect the killing blow I'd been sharpening over these torturous months. "The games end tonight, Elise," I stated with finality. "Your move." And with that, I brushed past her up the stairs to face the inevitable reckoning with Edwin head-on, ready to watch her world of lies crumble into dust. No more holding back, no more mercy. Tonight, I would have my victory, one way or another. I steeled myself as I entered Edwin's study, the damning envelope clutched tightly. He looked up, his face etched with weary resignation. "What's this about, Marta?" Taking a deep breath, I laid it all out for him. The forgeries, the plagiarism, the utter disregard for ethics and basic human decency. As the evidence mounted, his expression morphed from skepticism to stunned disbelief. This can't be," he stammered, hands trembling as he pored over the documents. "I'm sorry, Edwin," I said, my voice softening slightly. "But it's all true. Elise has been lying to us from the start." The heavy thud of footsteps preceded Elise's furious arrival. "Don't listen to her, Dad," she cried, panic cracking her usually cool veneer. "It's all lies." Edwin slowly turned to face his daughter, anguish and hope warring across his features. "Please, baby, tell me this isn't real." For a suspended moment, I actually thought I saw a flicker of doubt, of regret in Elise's eyes, a chance for her to come clean and atone. But like every other opportunity, it was vaporized by the narcissistic fury that ruled her soul. "Oh, it's real, all right." She spat with blistering contempt. Every last word of her twisted little stories. "You want to know why, Dad? Because that psycho bitch has been out to destroy me from day one." White-hot rage contorted her delicate features into an unrecognizable mask of hatred as she turned her venom on me. "I saw you for what you are the moment we met, a pathetic, insecure fraud trying to buy her way into our family." Edwin made a strangled noise as if struck by the cruel verbal blows. But Elise was far from done, the floodgates of long-simmering resentments finally bursting open. "You think paying for my tuition earned you a place here? You were nothing but Dad's glorified sugar baby until I came along and exposed you for the lying snake you are." I opened my mouth, but she barreled onward in a fever pitch. "All you've done is poison everything with your evil mind games. Well, congratulations, Daddy's latest whore. You've finally turned him against his own flesh and blood." Edwin looked like he'd been shot, crumpling into his chair in a daze of devastated heartbreak. Finally, blessedly, Elise seemed to run out of vicious steam, her chest heaving. An oppressive silence swallowed the room as the shockwaves of her hate-laced tirade faded. Then Edwin raised his head and fixed his only child with a look of cold, hard resolution. "Get out," he said in a toneless rasp. "I don't want to look at you right now." Elise actually flinched like she'd been slapped. "What?" "You heard me," he stated with quiet steel, more emotion in those two words than 1,000 screams. "Get out." Whatever fleeting sympathy I'd felt for Elise in that moment vanished as the sheer extent of her maliciousness, her irredeemable depravity, crystallized before my eyes. This was no wounded, conflicted teenager acting out. This was a diabolical force of hate and selfishness that could never be reasoned with, never be redeemed, only cut out like the cancer it was before it metastasized. As Elise stormed out in a haze of fury and denial, it was like a crushing weight lifted from my shoulders. At long last, the storm had broken. Now, only the reckoning remained. The aftermath of Elise's volcanic outburst was like the eerie calm after a devastating storm. Edwin and I sat in numb silence, the weight of her hatred still suffocating the room. Finally, he spoke in a hoarse whisper. "All those years, how could I have been so blind?" I wanted to offer some reassurance, but what could I possibly say? The truth was a bitter pill. His beloved daughter was a master deceiver who had played him like a violin. Elise eventually slunk back, eyes still blazing defiance. "You're really going to take her lies over your own child?" she spat. Edwin slowly rose, a broken man, but one who had glimpsed the unvarnished truth at last. "Those weren't lies, Elise. They were facts you can no longer deny." She opened her mouth, grasping for another retort, but he raised a weary hand. "Enough. I can't even look at you right now." "What are you saying?" Her voice quavered for the first time. "I'm saying that until you take responsibility for your actions, I want you out of this house." The words seemed to drain him of his last reserves. Elise actually rocked back on her heels, stunned. "You're kicking me out?" "You're an adult now," Edwin stated flatly. "If you want to embrace being a liar and cheat, you can do it elsewhere." A snarl twisted her lips as the transgressor's mask slipped back on. "Fine, I never wanted to be part of this screwed-up family anyway." As she turned to storm off, no doubt plotting her revenge, I finally couldn't resist one last parting shot. "That's right, Elise. Run along like you always do when confronted with the consequences of your cruelty. Clearly Mom's training paid off spectacularly." She froze, then whirled with a look of such smoldering hatred it actually sent a chill down my spine. "Don't you dare bring my mother into this," she hissed in a low, dangerous tone. I simply gave her a level look. "Why? Ashamed of the miserable witch who warped you into her own poisonous image?" Her hands clenched into trembling fists as she drew a shuddering breath, visibly fighting for control. "At least she was flesh and blood," Elise finally spat. "Not some desperate, soulless lesion like you'll always be." With that Zaprusky strike, she whirled and stormed out, leaving me reeling from the verbal blast radius. As the full sting of her parting insult lanced through me, I had to fight back the gut punch of shame and hurt it triggered. For all my tough posturing, her cruel talent for cutting me where it hurt most remained as sharp as ever. But this time, it would be the last time. Because in finally unleashing the harsh consequences her behavior deserved, a line had been irrevocably crossed. There would be no makeup, no forgiveness tour. My war with Elise was over. I had cut her toxicity out of my life forever, even if her final strikes still found their mark. The weeks after kicking Elise out were some of the darkest of my life. Our once happy home felt haunted by the specter of betrayal and toxic vitriol we'd endured. Edwin was a shell of himself, plagued by waves of guilt for being so blind to his own daughter's malignant nature for so long. I did my best to comfort him, but his anguish constantly reopened the wounds Elise had carved into our family. "How could I have failed her so utterly as a father?" he'd lament, tears in his eyes. "What did I do to make her that hateful?" All I could do was hold him, knowing there were no easy answers. Elise's hatred seemed to have taken root long before I arrived, her cruel depravity already metastasizing unchecked. Our arrival had simply been the catalyst that ignited her worst impulses in an effort to destroy what she couldn't control. As the weeks dragged into months with no word from Elise, a tense unease gripped me. Was this just the warped calm before her inevitable counterattack? A part of me remained on edge, wondering when and how she'd strike back in retaliation. But that vigilance gradually faded as the weeks became months of blissful silence. Then, one sunny April morning, the doorbell rang. I tensed automatically until Edwin called out in shock. "Marta? It's Elise." My heart pounded as I rounded the corner to indeed find Elise on our doorstep, looking haggard and humbled. She avoided my gaze as a heavy silence stretched between us all. Finally, she spoke in a low, gravelly tone. I hit rock bottom. Lost my job. Got kicked out of my place." She swallowed hard, the very act of vulnerability seemingly agonizing for her. "I have nowhere else to go." Tears sprang to Edwin's eyes as he reached out a trembling hand. "Oh, sweetheart." Elise flinched like she'd been struck. "Dad, please, don't. I don't deserve your sympathy after—" Her voice cracked with a rawness I'd never heard from her. "After everything." An endless, weighty pause consumed the air before she almost inaudibly uttered two words that stopped my heart. "I'm sorry." Another deafening silence as we both processed the impossible. Elise was finally facing the consequences of her malice and depravity with something resembling accountability. Then, to my utter astonishment, she turned her hollow gaze towards me. "Marta, I have put you through hell with my behavior, my anger, my cruel words. None of it was justified." I could only stare in shock as she squared her shoulders, almost violently forcing out the words. You were right to cut me off, maybe by feeling what it's like to truly hit bottom. She trailed off, a muscle twitching in her jaw, before rallying once more. I just hope I can begin trying to make amends. If you'll give me the chance. My breath caught in my throat as years of torment and suffering crashed together in a maelstrom of conflicting emotion. This was the reptilian brain's ultimate test. Flee the source of trauma, or risk opening myself to further torment by extending an olive branch. As I met Edwin's fragile, pleading look, I realized only one path could even begin to heal our fractured family. Exhaling deeply, I finally spoke in a voice considerably calmer than I felt. Come inside, Elise. We have a lot to talk about.